Chapter 520. Long Yunxiao was wearing the God of War armor and his whole body was tightly protected. No one could tell whether he was injured or not. He stared at Ji Tianqing with cold eyes and said in a low voice, "Ji Tianqing, I haven't seen you for half a year and your strength has grown to such an extent. You really surprised this monarch. However, this monarch will not take it lightly and will never give you another chance." As his voice fell, he turned into a golden streamer, wielding the dragon teeth blade in his left arm and the nine-cloud sword in his right hand. He rushed toward Ji Tianqing as fast as an aurora. Dragon sword and thunder blade, chaotic world's mad martial art. Long Yunxiao let out a sonorous roar and his whole body burst out with a soaring fighting spirit. Dazzling Zidian thunder light gushed out of the dragon teeth blade and condensed into a huge Zidian blade light. The nine-cloud sword burst out with a bright golden light and turned into a 30-meter-long sacred golden dragon. Long Yunxiao obviously used his ultimate move. He held the thunderbolt in his left hand and manipulated the sacred golden dragon in his right hand. He instantly rushed in front of Ji Tianqing. Kill! Following his furious roar, the divine and berserk golden dragon, which seemed to have descended from the heavens, attacked Ji Tianqing from both sides. Suddenly, the entire monarch stage was shrouded in purple thunder light and dazzling golden light. It became dazzling and chaotic. Ji Tianqing's figure was submerged by the thunderbolt and the golden dragon and immediately fell into a dangerous situation. At the critical moment, he put away the black dragon sword without hesitation and spread out a pair of golden wings in front of him to protect himself. Boom! The thunderbolt and the sacred golden dragon fell from the sky and fiercely blasted Ji Tianqing, causing a loud noise that shook the nine heavens. He was blasted back hundreds of meters on the spot. His feet sank deep into the black stone floor before he stopped. The ground where he was originally standing had long been blasted by the thunderbolt and the golden dragon, creating a huge crater with a radius of tens of meters and numerous cracks. The incomparably violent energy formed a half-purple and half-golden shockwave that spread out in all directions and fiercely hit the defensive array of the monarch stage. The deafening sound reverberated on the monarch stage for a long time before dissipating. Long Yunxiao stood in the sky, looking down at Ji Tianqing. Seeing that he wasn't injured, he couldn't help narrowing his eyes. Ji Tianqing, you can actually block this monarch's ultimate move. Now, you are indeed qualified to be this monarch's opponent. Ji Tianqing also flapped his golden wings and stepped into the sky, standing 100 steps away from Long Yunxiao. He calmly looked at Long Yunxiao and coldly said, "Half a year ago, that night, I told you that I was going to kill you. So what if he was the emperor? Half a year later, you might not be able to beat me. Today, I will make you recognize yourself and willingly withdraw." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body ignited with a monstrous golden flame. His body merged with the flame, forming a giant golden sword that was more than 10 meters long. Shua! The huge golden sword carried a sharp power that could destroy everything as it shot towards Long Yunxiao like an aurora. The golden light that burst out from the huge sword formed a huge and incomparably powerful white tiger phantom. The white tiger opened its bloody mouth and stretched out a pair of huge sharp claws. With a violent and murderous momentum, it pounced towards Long Yunxiao. White tiger sacred sword. At that moment, the monarch stage was filled with dazzling golden light as sword chi filled the sky. A sacred beast white tiger appeared out of thin air and let out an earth-shattering roar. Below the monarch stage, the hundreds of thousands of people were shocked and astonished. The strength that Ji Tianqing displayed had refreshed everyone's understanding of him again and again. Even the princes in the sky were staring intently at the emperor platform, their hearts filled with anticipation. Long Yunxiao's eyes flashed with graveness and fear. He also went all out to display his ultimate move to block the attack of the white tiger sacred sword. Moonwalk Qing Tsang, mysterious sky demon suppression. He held the dragon teeth saber in his left hand and the nine-cloud sword in his right hand. A pair of golden wings unfolded behind him as his body burst out with five-colored spiritual light. He waved his saber and sword and slashed out an overwhelming amount of saber light and sword shadows, forming a huge net with a radius of hundreds of meters that enveloped the heaven and earth. It enveloped Ji Tianqing on the spot. In the originally clear sky, dark clouds appeared out of nowhere and hundreds of dazzling purple thunderbolts appeared. Kaboom! Hundreds of thunderbolts, carrying the power to destroy everything, fiercely struck down from the sky and blasted towards the white tiger sacred sword. At this moment, Long Yunxiao was stepping on the sky and holding the thunderbolts in his hand. He controlled the saber light and sword shadows that covered the sky as if he had the power to control the heaven and earth. He was as majestic as a god. Everyone in the square looked up at him with deep reverence and worship in their hearts. As a martial artist, who didn't want to become a martial arts powerhouse like him, who could control the heaven and earth and thunderbolts and was as majestic and sacred as a god? In the crowd, Ji Ku, Yen, and the Beast King all looked very worried. Their hearts were in their throats as they were nervous for Ji Tianqing. The more than 20 princes in the sky had just witnessed Long Yunxiao's true strength and trump card. They all looked amazed and expectant. At the same time, the saber light, sword net, and thunderbolts all blasted the white tiger sacred sword. Boom! Boom! An extremely violent sound exploded on the monarch platform, causing the entire platform to tremble. The loud sound could be clearly heard in the area with a radius of dozens of miles. At that moment, the emperor stage was filled with saber light, sword shadows, and thunderbolts. It became extremely turbid and chaotic. Everyone around the emperor stage stared at the situation on the stage with their eyes wide open, looking forward to the result. After 10 breaths of time, the reverberating loud sound gradually dissipated. The saber light, sword shadows, and thunderbolts also finally disappeared. Ji Tianqing and Long Yunxiao's figures appeared. They were standing on both sides of the emperor stage, safe and sound. They looked at each other from hundreds of meters away. Long Yunxiao's ultimate move was indeed powerful. It had defeated Ji Tianqing's white tiger sacred sword on the spot. However, Ji Tianqing's defense was also very strong. He was not injured by the saber light, sword net, and thunderbolts. He just looked a little pale. His blood and qi were not flowing smoothly, and his true essence was a little shaken. Long Yunxiao frowned and stared at him. After a moment of silence, he said, "If this monarch remembers correctly, you seem to have only mastered the power of metal and fire. Your first move just now actually used the power of ice. Moreover, this monarch's 2 ultimate moves were blocked by you. Ji Tianqing, have you broken through the shackles and reached the sky origin stage?" His tone was dignified and solemn. There was a trace of disbelief in it. Ji Tianqing didn't hide it. He calmly nodded and said, "That's right. Just yesterday." After saying that, his whole body burst out with an incomparably powerful aura. It was as if he could communicate with the heaven and earth and master all things of the 5 elements. That was the aura that only a sky origin stage powerhouse could have. Long Yunxiao's face suddenly changed. His eyes flashed with a touch of astonishment. After a moment, he came back to his senses and revealed a face full of smiles. "In just 2 or 3 months, you actually broke through the shackles and reached the sky origin stage. Very good." Chapter 521. For a genius like Long Yunxiao, he was never afraid of his opponent's strength. Ordinary warriors were not qualified to be his opponent. Only monstrous geniuses were worthy of his attention. The stronger the opponent's talent and strength, the more it could stimulate his fighting spirit. Ji Tianqing stared at him with a confident smile on his face. He said in a sonorous tone, "You see me as a strong opponent, but unfortunately, you are not my opponent. Take this." he suddenly shouted angrily. His body once again ignited with monstrous crimson flames. His body and the flames merged to form a 20-meter-long giant flaming sword. Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword. The powerful giant flaming sword streaked across the sky like a meteor and slashed toward Long Yunxiao. The crimson flames on the giant sword condensed into a majestic vermilion bird phantom. The vermilion bird sacred beast extended its claws and pointed its long and sharp beak. It dived down from the sky, emitting an incomparably sacred and violent aura. At that moment, an unparalleled heat enveloped the entire monarch stage. The air was distorted by the high temperature and rippled like water. The vermilion bird sacred sword descended from the sky and immediately covered Long Yunxiao's figure. At the critical moment, Long Yunxiao waved his sword with all his might. He slashed out dozens of sword shadows to block the vermilion bird sacred sword's attack. Boom boom boom. The vermilion bird sacred sword collided with the sword shadows in the sky, creating a deafening explosion. The crimson flame spread out and engulfed the entire monarch stage. The dozens of sword shadows were also shattered by the vermilion bird sacred sword and splashed in all directions. The fragments of the saber light and sword light hit the monarch stage, creating countless pits and cracks on the ground. In the end, Long Yunxiao was still unable to block the vermilion bird sacred sword's attack. With a muffled bang, he was sent flying by the vermilion bird sacred sword and slammed into the strange beast statue at the edge of the altar. The tall and majestic black stone statue trembled uncontrollably from the impact, emitting a dull buzzing sound. Long Yunxiao rolled and fell to the ground. The god of war armor he was wearing was damaged. There was a dent in his chest and it seemed like it was about to break. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and flew into the air in a flash. The vermilion bird sacred sword had already dissipated, and Ji Tianqing's figure also appeared, standing in the center of the monarch stage. He didn't give Long Yunxiao a chance to counterattack and used an even more terrifying skill. He slowly raised his left arm, which was as red as fire and seemed to be condensed from lava, and fiercely slapped at Long Yunxiao who was in midair. Burning Sky Palm. As he roared, a giant flaming palm with a radius of 100 meters suddenly appeared. It carried a violent power that could destroy the world and went straight for Long Yunxiao. The entire monarch stage was filled with flames. The high temperature seemed to have ignited the air. It was as if a scorching sun had appeared out of nowhere in the originally clear sky. Half of the sky was illuminated with a blood-red hue. Long Yunxiao's pupils shrank as he sensed the terrifying power contained within the giant flaming palm. A look of dread appeared on his face. Without a doubt, the power of this flaming palm was enough to threaten his life. However, his aura was locked on by the giant flaming palm, so he couldn't escape or dodge. At this critical moment, he could only use his secret technique with all his strength to resist the attack of the giant flaming palm. Celestial Shield. The true essence in Long Yunxiao's body surged out like a flood and condensed into a 5-colored light wall in front of him. Although this 5-meter-long and 5-meter-wide spiritual light wall looked only 3 fingers thick, it was formed by his secret technique and had a very strong defense. Just as he condensed the celestial shield, the giant flaming palm had already arrived and slapped the celestial shield. Bang! In the deafening sound, the celestial shield only lasted for a moment before it was smashed into pieces and exploded. However, the giant flaming palm slapped Long Yunxiao and wrapped him up, flying into the sky. Hundreds of meters behind him was the monarch stage's defensive array, the 5-colored light barrier that covered the sky. Boom! The giant flaming palm wrapped around Long Yunxiao and hit the 5-colored light barrier with a destructive force. Suddenly, there was a loud sound that shook the sky. At that moment, the 5-colored light barrier that covered the entire monarch stage began to tremble violently, creating layers upon layers of ripples. In the square with a radius of 10 miles, the hundreds of thousands of people and martial artists were dizzy and their ears were buzzing. The majestic and dignified monarch stage was also shaken to the point of shaking non-stop, and cracks appeared on the ground. The giant flaming palm's power was enough to destroy a 10,000-foot mountain, but it was blocked by the defensive array and exploded into a sea of red fire. The endless sea of red fire turned the entire monarch stage into a sea of fire. Long Yunxiao's figure was also drowned in the sea of red fire and couldn't be seen for a long time. Such an earth-shattering commotion caused the 100,000 people present to be inexplicably shocked. Their faces were filled with astonishment. Countless people looked at the monarch stage in astonishment and exclaimed in disbelief. "Oh my God! Is this the power of a heaven origin expert? The power of that giant flaming palm is too terrifying. Fortunately, there is a defensive array on the monarch stage. Otherwise, that giant flaming palm would have destroyed everything within a radius of 10 miles. I wonder if the Son of Heaven can block such a powerful giant flaming palm? We underestimated that Ji Tianqing too much before. This person is so powerful. No wonder he dares to challenge the Son of Heaven. It's over. I'm afraid the outcome has been decided. The Son of Heaven is going to be defeated. No. The Son of Heaven is the heir of the imperial court. How noble is his status and talent. He is the #1 genius of the human race. How can he be defeated? Not only were the people on the square shocked, but even the more than 20 princes in the sky were also surprised. Even the strongest and arrogant Murong Lingfeng and Duanmu Yulong looked at Ji Tianqing in a new light. The joy and anticipation in their eyes grew even stronger. This Ji Tianqing is indeed extraordinary. There is a high chance that he can defeat Long Yunxiao. Humph. If Ji Tianqing can really defeat Long Yunxiao, I want to see how Long Yunxiao will deal with this. How will he have the face to choose a heavenly concubine? In the lofty pagoda on the south side of the square, the emperor and the imperial tutor had been watching the battle closely. Their expressions had become a little serious. The imperial tutor sighed faintly. I didn't expect that our race would have a genius who can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Son of Heaven. If this person didn't challenge the Son of Heaven, it would be a blessing for our race. It's a pity that this is the first time this person has shown his talent in front of the world. He actually wants to use the Son of Heaven to make a name for himself. The emperor frowned slightly and said in a serious tone, based on the strength that this person has shown, he is not any weaker than Yunxiao. I'm afraid it will be difficult for Yunxiao to win today. There are a total of 6 chapters today. There will be another 3 chapters at around 14 p.m. Brothers, please wait patiently. Thank you for your understanding. Chapter 522. After a long time, the boundless sea of fire on the monarch stage dissipated. Long Yunxiao's figure appeared. He was still standing tall and straight on the stage. But his appearance was somewhat miserable. The golden robe he wore had a few charred holes and his wide sleeves were rolled up. Moreover, the god of war armor he was wearing was gone. When the heaven-burning palm shattered the celestial barrier, it completely shattered his god of war armor and turned it into metal fragments. Fortunately, the celestial barrier and the god of war armor offset 50% of the power of the heaven-burning palm, so he was not seriously injured. He held the dragon teeth blade in his left hand and the 9-cloud sword in his right hand. He looked at Ji Tianqing expressionlessly. His face was somewhat pale and there were traces of blood at the corner of his mouth. Ji Tianqing stood calmly in the middle of the field, his eyes fixed on Long Yunxiao. His expression was indifferent as he said in a firm tone, "Long Yunxiao, I will definitely win this battle." Long Yunxiao did not refute. He only revealed a smile and said in a playful tone, "That's right. After all, if you don't win, you will die. You have no way out. You must fight to the death." Ji Tianqing frowned, gazing at Long Yunxiao, but didn't say anything. Long Yunxiao was right. He had no way out. He could only win at all costs. If he won, his future would be bright. He would be famous and enter the monarch palace. He would make Long Yunxiao voluntarily withdraw and obtain Madame Yun's approval. If he lost, he would die. Long Yunxiao raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Ji Tianqing, although your heaven-burning palm is very powerful, it is far from enough. If you want to defeat this monarch, you have to take out all your trump cards and burst out all your potential." He shouted in a sonorous tone. His body turned into a colorful stream of light and rushed into the sky. 8 steps of wind and thunder. Long Yunxiao shouted in a low voice. His feet moved in a mysterious way as he shuttled back and forth in the sky. Every time he took a step in the empty sky, an invisible and mysterious power would burst forth from him. After he finished his 8 steps, an array diagram that covered the sky appeared out of nowhere in the empty sky. The array diagram, which was several hundred meters wide, was made up of tens of thousands of black and gray lines, showing the vast sky. Inside the formation diagram, wind and clouds surged, thunder rumbled, and lightning flashed. It displayed the mighty might of the heavens and emitted an incomparably majestic aura. Long Yunxiao stood in the air above the wind and thunder array. His left hand held the dragon teeth blade and pointed at Ji Tianqing. Surge of wind and thunder. Instantly, the wind and clouds in the wind and thunder array diagram surged violently, and thunder surged. More than 10 Zhidian thunderbolts, as thick as buckets, burst forth and fiercely struck down. Boom! Zhidian lightning descended from the sky, carrying with it an incomparably ferocious and overbearing power as it blasted toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's expression immediately changed, and he immediately retreated 100 meters away. Pang pang pang. More than 10 thunderbolts blasted out more than 10 deep scorched pits on the stone floor, and gravel splashed everywhere. Ji Tianqing had just stopped, and he didn't have time to launch a counterattack. However, Long Yunxiao was already prepared. He held the 9-cloud sword in his right hand, pointed at him again, and shouted in a low voice, 10,000 thunderbolts. Suddenly, electric snakes danced wildly in the wind and thunder array diagram, and dazzling thunderbolts burst out. Thousands of thunderbolts enveloped the entire emperor stage, and like a rain of arrows, they poured down and fiercely struck toward Ji Tianqing. This time, Ji Tianqing had nowhere to hide. He could only open his golden wings and wrap himself up. Pang 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 pang. Countless thunderbolts fell down like raindrops, continuously bombarding the golden wings, and burst out a series of muffled sounds. Ji Tianqing's entire body was submerged in the thunderbolts. His body was constantly trembling, and he was constantly pushed back. Thousands of thunderbolts bombarded him like a dense rain, and he could only resist, and he was simply unable to counterattack. Thunderbolts were more violent than flames. They represented the divine might of heaven, and no one could block them. At this moment, Long Yunxiao stood proudly in the sky, stepping on the wind and thunder array diagram. He held a saber and sword in his hand, and he controlled the thunderbolts. He was truly divine and mighty to the extreme. He controlled the wind, the clouds, and the thunderbolts, just like the gods in the legends who controlled the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. The 100,000 martial artists in the square found it incredible, and they were full of reverence and worship for him. The more than 20 princes in the sky were also surprised, and their eyes were full of splendor. Long Yunxiao had only been in the emperor residence for 2 years, and he rarely had the chance to fight. It was even more impossible for him to use all his trump cards. Many of the princes didn't know his true strength, and they didn't know his trump cards and ultimate skills. Now, the crowd had witnessed this wonderful peak battle with their own eyes, and only then did they see Long Yunxiao's terrifying means. For a moment, many of the princes who were stronger than him were also a little wary of him. Ji Tianqing kept retreating, and everywhere he passed, he was enveloped by thunderbolts. Charred pits were blasted out on the ground, and debris flew everywhere. Finally, he retreated to the edge of the Emperor stage, and there was no place for him to retreat. However, the thunderbolts in the sky were still as dense as rain, and they didn't stop. The wind and thunder array diagram could absorb the power of heaven and earth within a radius of 100 miles, and it could continuously produce thunderbolts. Ji Tianqing could withstand it for a while, but he couldn't withstand it forever. At most, he would exhaust his true essence in 15 minutes, and he wouldn't be able to support the power of the golden wings. At that time, he would be turned into charcoal by the thunderbolts in the sky. No. I can't just block it. I have to counterattack. Long Yunxiao relies on the wind and thunder array diagram. As long as the wind and thunder array diagram is still there, he can control the power of heaven and earth's thunderbolts. Only by destroying the wind and thunder array diagram can I break his ultimate skill. Ji Tianqing thought to himself, and he instantly made up his mind. He leaned against the edge of the Emperor stage and used the golden wings to protect himself. He urged the sword embryo in his abdomen to fly out of his body. Sword of Judgment. The sword embryo transformed into a huge golden sword that was 20 meters long. It lit up with a dazzling golden light, and a pair of golden light wings condensed. Swish! The golden sacred sword contained an indestructible and unstoppable power. Under the control of Ji Tianqing, the golden sacred sword penetrated the blockade of the thunderbolts in the sky, and brazenly attacked the wind and thunder array diagram in the sky. Boom! In the deafening loud noise, the sword of judgment ruthlessly stabbed the wind and thunder array diagram, and purple thunderbolts that covered the sky burst out. The wind and thunder array diagram wasn't a physical object, but a phantom array formed by Long Yunxiao's array Dao. The Sword of Judgment was a huge sword that contained 30% of Ji Tianqing's power, and its power was terrifyingly powerful. The Sword of Judgment immediately pierced a huge hole in the wind and thunder array diagram, which was hundreds of meters in radius, and shattered into black clouds and thunderbolts. The wind and thunder array diagram collapsed and shattered. Chapter 523. Long Yunxiao did not have the protection of the divine war armor. When he was stabbed by the golden sacred sword, he spat out a mouthful of blood and was severely injured. He crashed into the five-colored light barrier. His body was trembling from the impact, and his consciousness was a little blurry. He fell from the sky powerlessly. A huge wound appeared on his chest, and blood kept spilling out. At this time, the golden sacred sword flew high into the sky, and it emitted a dazzling golden light. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the golden sacred sword was like a whirlpool, crazily swallowing the spiritual energy from all directions. Within a radius of 10 miles, all the spiritual qi of heaven and earth gathered and turned into strands of five-colored spiritual light, surging into the golden sacred sword. Suddenly, the golden sacred sword grew 10 meters in size, and its power increased by 50%. The sword intent it emitted was even more violent and fierce. Ji Tianqing stood proudly on the monarch stage, looking up at the golden sacred sword in the sky. He let out a powerful and domineering roar. Sword, come! Suddenly, the golden sacred sword suspended in the sky locked onto Long Yunxiao's aura. It carried an aura that could suppress everything and slammed down from the sky. Slash! The golden sacred sword carried a golden flame tail. It was faster than lightning, and it instantly hit Long Yunxiao. Long Yunxiao was already injured by the golden sacred sword. He fell from the sky, and before he could block or dodge, his body was engulfed by the golden flame. Boom! In an earth-shattering explosion, the golden sacred sword wrapped around Long Yunxiao and slammed into the ground of the monarch stage. The entire monarch stage shook violently, and it trembled continuously for dozens of times. A huge crater with a radius of dozens of meters was formed on the hard rock ground, and gravel flew everywhere. The dazzling golden light mixed with the violent air waves, forming a golden shockwave. It spread out in all directions and crashed into the five-colored light barrier. The five-colored light barrier kept shaking, and layers of ripples appeared. It was even more dazzling and colorful. The golden light covered the sky, and it filled hundreds of meters of space. It drowned the entire monarch stage, and it didn't dissipate for a long time. The loud explosion was still echoing in the sky, and it gradually faded away. After about 100 breaths of time, the monarch stage calmed down, and the vision became clear again. Ji Tianqing stood on the monarch stage, his body as straight as a sword. However, his countenance was slightly pale, and the white robe he wore had already been charred black. It was tattered, and he seemed to be in a sorry state. Moreover, he had repeatedly used his ultimate skills and trump cards. More than half of his true essence had been consumed. He only had about 30% left. 100 meters in front of him, there was a huge crater in the ground, with cracks extending all around it. At the bottom of the deep pit, Long Yunxiao was lying in the ruins covered in blood. He was slowly struggling to get up. There were several large wounds on his left shoulder, chest, and back. The wound was badly mangled and dark red blood gushed out ceaselessly. It was even to the extent that the bones within could be faintly seen. Even though he was severely injured, he did not lose consciousness and remained conscious. He broke free from the rubble and slowly stood up. He condensed a pair of wings with his true essence and flew out of the huge pit. Shwa! Long Yunxiao landed on the edge of the crater and staggered a few steps before he could steady himself. He held the dragon teeth blade and the nine-cloud sword in his hands. His body was slightly bent as he stood on the monarch stage. At this point, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight and could not fight anymore. There was no doubt that Long Yunxiao had been defeated. The commoners in the square were all dumbfounded when they saw Long Yunxiao's severely injured appearance. When the crowd came to their senses, they immediately burst into discussions and exclamations. This is unbelievable. Ji Tianqing actually has such terrifying strength. There is actually such a marvelous swordsmanship in this world. Today, I have learned something new. It's over. The Son of Heaven is severely injured. He has already lost. The outcome has been decided. I never thought that the result would be so unbelievable. A nameless boy can actually defeat the number one genius of the human race. The human race is really full of geniuses. That guy called Ji Tianqing not only passed the Monarch Mansion's assessment, but also obtained the title of the number one genius of the human race. He is simply too monstrous. This is too shocking. I haven't seen such a thrilling and wonderful battle for more than 10 years. From today onwards, Ji Tianqing's name will spread throughout Middle Ground and become famous throughout the world. The human race has one more top genius. The Monarch Mansion will also have a new noble prince. The more than 20 princes in the sky were also shocked and in disbelief. That guy, Ji Tianqing, is actually able to display such a miraculous sword technique? This person is a formidable opponent. When he enters the Monarch Mansion, we must be careful of him. Based on Ji Tianqing's performance just now, in time, he will definitely become an influential figure in the Monarch Mansion. Murong Lingfeng and Duanmu Yulong looked at each other across the sky and smiled meaningfully. They exchanged a few words through their spiritual senses. Ji Tianqing has actually defeated Long Yunxiao. I'm afraid that there will be a more exciting show later. This is good news for us. When Ji Tianqing enters the Monarch Mansion, we will make another plan. In the pagoda to the south of the square. The monarch emperor frowned and looked a little serious. The imperial tutor stroked his white beard and shook his head with a sigh. As the monarch emperor expected, Ji Tianqing has really defeated the Son of Heaven. The Son of Heaven's reputation has been damaged and he has been seriously injured. How will he choose his heavenly concubine later? The monarch emperor was silent for a moment and then ordered in a deep voice, "Imperial tutor, pass down the order to carefully investigate that boy called Ji Tianqing. This boy's talent and strength have surpassed Yun Xiao. I want to see what kind of background he has." On the monarch stage, Ji Tianqing and Long Yunxiao looked at each other and ignored the reactions and discussions of the crowd. Long Yunxiao endured his injuries and tried his best to straighten his body. He stared at Ji Tianqing. His expression was very calm. There was no anger or unwillingness after being defeated. Instead, there was a trace of relief in his eyes. He. Ji Tianqing, you are very good. He chuckled. His voice was a little hoarse and his tone was a little low. Today's battle is the most satisfying battle I've ever had in my life. I have to admit that I have lost. You are indeed qualified to stand by her side. You are worthy of her trust. Congratulations, you are about to become the 56th emperor. I will also fulfill my promise and not pester her anymore. After saying that, Long Yunxiao raised his head and chuckled a few times. He turned around and was about to leave. However, there was a deep sadness and desolation hidden in that pretentious and carefree chuckle. Wait! At this moment, Ji Tianqing shouted softly. Long Yunxiao stopped stumbling and did not turn around. With his back facing him, he asked in a deep voice, "You have already won. What else do you have to say?" Ji Tianqing stared at him with a complicated expression. He had used all his trump cards and strength to finally defeat Long Yunxiao in front of everyone and obtain victory. From now on, he would be the #1 genius of the human race whose name would spread throughout the world. He would also be recognized by the Cloud Spirit Palace and would be able to stay with Yun Yao forever. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, and he should be overjoyed and excited. However, his expression was as calm as usual, without the slightest hint of joy. He stared at Long Yunxiao's back and was silent for a moment before asking, "You sacrificed so much for her, but in the end, you helped me. Was it worth it?" Long Yunxiao's body trembled slightly, but he immediately covered it up. His voice was calm and cold as he said, "I don't understand what you are talking about." After saying that, he walked away without looking back. He condensed a pair of wings with his true essence and flew down the Emperor platform. Chapter 524. With Long Yunxiao's departure, the challenge ended. Divine Master He Yu descended from the sky and landed on the Emperor stage. He looked at Ji Tianqing and nodded his head slightly. Then, he announced the result with a loud voice. "I announce the end of the challenge. Ji Tianqing has passed the test. From today onwards, he will be the 56th prince of the Emperor's residence." Divine Master He Yu's voice spread across a radius of 10 miles. Over 100,000 people could hear him clearly. After announcing the result, Divine Master He Yu looked at Ji Tianqing again and said seriously, "Ji Tianqing, from today onwards, you will be the prince of the Emperor's residence. A month ago, your crime of trespassing into the Emperor's residence will be removed. I will not pursue it any further. From today onwards, your words and actions will represent the Emperor's residence. You must remember that your words and actions will not bring down the prestige of the Emperor's residence. Do not damage the dignity of the Emperor's residence." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed. He said respectfully, "I will remember Divine Master's teachings." Divine Master He Yu nodded his head and took out a diamond-shaped purple crystal token. He flicked his finger and threw it to Ji Tianqing. "Within a month, you can report to the Emperor's residence at any time after you have settled your affairs. At that time, I will arrange the cave residence and spiritual vein for you." Ji Tianqing accepted the purple crystal token and thanked Divine Master He Yu again. Divine Master He Yu did not say anything else. He slowly lifted his right foot and stomped on the ground. Suddenly, a formless, majestic energy surged into the ground and spread out, covering the entire emperor stage. Ji Tianqing immediately saw that the devastated ground under his feet was quickly changing. Under the restoration of the formless energy, the densely packed pits were smoothed out. Countless cracks and ravines of different sizes were quickly healed. After a few breaths, the ground of the emperor stage was restored to its original state. It was intact as if nothing had happened. After doing all this, Divine Master He Yu waved his sleeve and removed the defensive array that covered the emperor stage. Then, he flew into the sky and transformed into a pair of huge black wings of light, flying towards the forest of divine monuments. Ji Tianqing watched as God Teacher He Yu disappeared into the horizon. He then turned around and left the monarch stage, flying back to the crowd below the stage. Below the emperor stage, countless martial artists and commoners were still immersed in great shock, discussing endlessly. Within a radius of 10 miles, there was a boiling cauldron of voices. The rolling waves of voices were like the eruption of a mountain torrent, deafening the ears. In the crowd, Ji Ku, Yan, and the Beast King were all filled with excitement and couldn't help but cheer. After all, the Beast King was a Heaven Yuan cultivator and a senior. Naturally, he would not cheer. However, his face was filled with a gratified smile as he stroked his beard and nodded in admiration. Great! Tianqing, this kid, had finally made a name for himself, his name shaking the central state. In a moment, this old man will write a letter to Chu Tianqing. If that old man hears the news, he will be overjoyed. Yan was so excited that his little face flushed red. His eyes sparkled with a bright light. That's great. Senior brother Tianqing has finally won. He will be reunited with senior sister very soon. Ji Ku was the most gratified and excited. She was so happy that she cried. She couldn't help but say, I knew that brother Tianqing would definitely win. No matter what danger there is, no matter how strong the opponent is, he will not be defeated. She knew that Ji Tianqing could only win and not lose. Otherwise, he would lose everything and be executed by the monarch mansion. Today, Ji Tianqing had finally defeated Long Yunxiao and won. This was the change from hell to heaven. How could she not be happy for Ji Tianqing? At this moment, Ji Tianqing flew back to the three of them and landed in front of Ji Ku. Ji Ku immediately said excitedly, Brother Tianqing, you finally won. That's great. Are you hurt? Do you want to meditate? Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He said gently, I'm fine. You don't have to worry. I defeated Tianzi and passed the test. You should be happy. Why are you crying? As he spoke, he reached out to help Ji Ku wipe away the tears from the corner of her eyes. Yan hurriedly came over and said with a smile, Senior brother Tianqing, junior sister Ji Ku is so happy that she's crying. Senior brother, you don't know. When you were fighting with Tianzi on the stage just now, junior sister was so nervous that she almost suffocated. She had been praying for you. Ji Ku suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She pretended to be angry and glared at Yan. Ji Tianqing patted Yan shoulder and asked with a smile, then when senior brother challenged Tianzi on the stage, weren't you nervous? Yan shook her head and said with a smile, I wasn't worried because I know that senior brother is the most powerful. I have confidence in you. Back then, even the unparalleled demon emperor who broke the seal was seriously injured by you and almost killed on the spot. Although Tianzi is the #1 genius of the human race, he's far from being as abnormal as you, senior brother. Abnormal? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and reached out to knock her little head, is there anyone who praises people like you? The Beast King squeezed over with a smile and said with relief, Tianqing, now that you've defeated Tianzi, you're the #1 genius of the human race. With your monstrous talent, after entering the monarch mansion, you'll definitely grow rapidly and soon become a famous figure in the Tianxian continent. If your master learns of this good news, he'll be so happy that he'll drink 300 cups of wine and get drunk. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and nodded with a smile. Yes, not only my master, but old Master Xiang will also be overjoyed. He'll definitely get drunk. The four of them discussed happily and laughed heartily from time to time. They were all in a good mood. In a palace on the south side of the square, a burly man in a black robe and a cloak was standing by the window of a room, staring at the square outside. The large cloak covered his head and face, making it difficult to see his appearance. However, this person was tall and straight, exuding a noble and dignified aura. It was obvious that his identity was extraordinary. Humph. Long Yun Xiao, that trash, actually lost to a nameless kid in front of everyone. He's really a disgrace to the imperial court. I really don't know why the old man was so blind to make that trash Long Yun Xiao the heir. The man in the black robe cursed in a low voice, his tone was filled with hatred. He looked below the monarch stage and stared at Ji Tianqing in the crowd. He whispered in a cold voice, Gao Yi, that useless trash, not only did he mess things up, he even let Ji Tianqing live until now. This little bastard ruined my plan. He's unforgivable and deserves to die. I was just about to go to the Tianshan region to find you, but I didn't expect you to come to the central state and deliver yourself to me. Humph. So what if you enter the monarch mansion? You dare to ruin my plan and block my path. I'll make sure you die without a burial place. The man in the black robe snorted coldly and turned to leave with a cold murderous intent. Chapter 525. Although the battle between Ji Tianqing and the Son of Heaven had already ended, but the hundreds of thousands of people and martial artists in the square still refused to leave and were still looking forward to it. After all, today was not only the day when Ji Tianqing challenged the Son of Heaven, but it was also the day when the Son of Heaven chose his heavenly concubine. Countless people wanted to see which woman could get the Son of Heaven's favor and become the noble heavenly concubine. However, a quarter of an hour passed quickly. The people were anxiously waiting, but there was still no movement on the emperor stage. No one from the imperial court went up the stage. Only the red lanterns and red silk brocade danced in the wind. The people were a little anxious and began to whisper to each other. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, Yan, and the Beast King were also waiting patiently in the square. Everyone wanted to know who Long Yun Xiao would choose as his heavenly concubine. Would he go back on his word and continue to pester Yun Yao? Or would he insist on choosing Yun Yao as his heavenly concubine? Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry to return to the Qingfeng courtyard to adjust his breathing. He wanted to see the final result so that he could be completely at ease. However, the Son of Heaven did not appear for a long time, and the people from the imperial court were also nowhere to be seen. Yan, was a little anxious and couldn't help but ask Ji Tianqing, senior brother Tianqing, how badly did you beat the Son of Heaven? Ji Tianqing looked at him in confusion, what's wrong? Yan, frowned and muttered, he hasn't appeared yet. Could it be that he is seriously injured and unconscious? Ji Tianqing was startled for a moment and shook his head with a chuckle, with his injuries, he definitely won't. Yan, looked up at the empty emperor stage and asked, then why hasn't he come out yet? We are still waiting for the result. What if he shamelessly refuses to admit it and chooses senior sister as his heavenly concubine in front of everyone? Ji Tianqing patted Yan's head and said with a smile, don't worry, he won't. He is the dignified Son of Heaven. How can he go back on his word? As soon as his voice fell, there was a commotion in the crowd in the square, and there was a hubbub of exclamations and discussion. A team of guards in silver armor was protecting two majestic ceremonial officials of the imperial court. They passed through the crowd on the square and walked toward the imperial stage. It wasn't long before the two officials of the imperial court ascended the imperial throne, and they announced a piece of news under the gazes of everyone present. By the order of the imperial court, His Majesty the Emperor is injured today, so it is inconvenient for him to hold a grand ceremony. The date of the selection of the heavenly consort will be postponed. When the ceremonial officer announced the order, many of the commoners began to discuss among themselves, their faces filled with disappointment. However, everyone understood that the Son of Heaven had a great battle with Ji Tianqing and suffered such terrible injuries. Naturally, it was not suitable for him to hold any more ceremonies. Even if the imperial court wanted to delay the selection of the heavenly consort, it was reasonable. No one was surprised. After announcing the imperial court's decree, the ceremonial officer left the emperor stage. The princes in the sky above the monarch's stage also looked disappointed and flew away silently. The commoners in the square also gradually dispersed in all directions and began to leave the square. Ji Tianqing, Yan and the others were naturally filled with disappointment as they followed the crowd out of the square. On the south side of the square, in a splendid palace, dozens of palace maids all maintained solemn postures as they stood respectfully around the main hall. At the entrance of the main hall, there were a few guards in golden armor who stood quietly. In the spacious and bright main hall, there were 3 beautiful women who were waiting quietly. These 3 beauties were all stunning in the world. Their figures and appearances were all top-notch, but their temperaments each had their own merits. In the middle of them was a woman in a white dress. Her temperament was as cold as frost, and her eyes were as indifferent as autumn water. She was Yunyao. She just stood there quietly, and there was a kind of celestial aura around her that made her look down on the world. The beauty in green standing on her left was Xiaofan from the Yong and region's Qiankuan sect. She was the same as Yunyao, wearing a simple green dress. She didn't put on any makeup, nor did she wear any jewelry. But even so, she had an innate noble and demure temperament. Even if she just stood there with an indifferent expression, she was like an orchid in an empty valley, quiet and leisurely, noble and elegant. Of course, compared to Yunyao, Xiaofan's temperament was slightly different. She had a bit more earthly aura. Yunyao was a cold fairy from the 9 heavens, while Xiaofan was a peerless beauty in the world. As for the third beauty, her name was Lan Huixin. Not only was she pure and beautiful, she had also specially dressed up. She wore an extremely gorgeous floor-length dress and dazzling accessories. Even if she was standing in the main hall waiting, she tried her best to maintain a perfect appearance and a dignified posture. She would not do anything that would affect her image. However, her eyes that seemed as gentle as water on the surface hid a deep sense of urgency and anticipation. Her eyes kept inadvertently glancing at the entrance of the main hall. Obviously, she was anxious and puzzled. Why hadn't the emperor sent someone to announce the decree? Why hadn't the ceremony been held yet? She had prepared and practiced for a few months for this day. Finally, the 2 ceremonial officials arrived late and stepped into the main hall with steady steps. The 2 of them walked to the front of the main hall and looked at the 3 beauties calmly. They said in a dignified tone, "3 beauties, His Majesty the Emperor is injured today and is recuperating in the palace. It is inconvenient to hold the ceremony. The imperial court has ordered that the selection of the heavenly consort will be temporarily postponed. The specific time is still to be discussed. During this time, we ask the 3 beauties to move to the Purple Thunder Palace and stay in His Majesty the Emperor's palace for the time being. Wait patiently." After hearing the ceremonial official's announcement, the 3 beauties' expressions changed slightly and revealed complicated expressions. When Yunyao heard this, she guessed the result of the battle between Ji Tianqing and the emperor. Her eyes flashed with relief and she secretly sighed in relief. Xiaofan's expression seemed calm, but a hint of worry flashed in her eyes. A few years ago, she was fortunate enough to enter the imperial court with her father and participate in the emperor's coming-of-age ceremony. It was also at that banquet that she first met Long Yunxiao. At that time, she had just experienced her first awakening of love and had never been moved by any man. Although there were many celebrities and noble families at the banquet that day, there were many elegant young masters and young masters of noble families. However, when An-Suan saw Long Yunxiao for the first time, she was attracted by his cold and dignified eyes that hid a sense of loneliness. From that day onwards, Long Yunxiao entered her heart and had firmly occupied her heart all these years. Originally, she was about to see Long Yunxiao, whom she had been separated from for a long time. However, she didn't expect Long Yunxiao to be seriously injured and unable to choose a heavenly consort. Her heart was filled with worry and anxiety. She only wanted to get to Long Yunxiao's side as soon as possible and see how his injuries were and whether they were critical. Lan Huixin, who was dressed to the nines, revealed a look of disappointment. In order to perform well today and win the emperor's heart, she had carefully prepared for a few months. It could be said that she had put in a lot of effort. However, in the end, it was all in vain. How could she not be depressed? Chapter 526. Not long after, the three beauties left the main hall. An-Suan and Lan Huixin followed the ceremonial officials and palace maids to the emperor's temporary residence. Yunyao left alone. She didn't go to the Purple Thunder Palace but went straight to the Clear Wind Courtyard in the Fish Dragon Alley. She knew that Long Yunxiao was strong and had many trump cards. Moreover, he had mastered many secret techniques and was very powerful. Even if Ji Tianqing could defeat Long Yunxiao and severely injure him, he would also be injured. Yunyao was worried and wanted to go to the Clear Wind Courtyard to visit Ji Tianqing and see how he was doing. The streets outside the palace were bustling with people. Countless people had just left the plaza and were walking in groups of 3 to 5 on the streets. They were discussing the previous battle as they walked. Many people were still immersed in the wonderful and earth-shattering battle. They couldn't help but exclaim loudly when the discussion reached a certain point. Yunyao passed through the streets and rushed to the Fish Dragon Alley without leaving a trace. She heard countless people's discussions along the way and combined their words together to understand the course of the battle. When she heard that Ji Tianqing and Long Yunxiao had fought with all their strength and used all their trump cards, her mood also fluctuated. At this moment, she only wanted to reach the Clear Wind Courtyard as soon as possible. However, just as she passed through a small alley and was about to enter another street, she was stopped by a woman in a black dress. The woman in black was tall and thin. Her appearance was ordinary, but she faintly exuded the aura of a powerhouse. Yunyao was no stranger to her. She recognized her at a glance. This was the personal bodyguard of her mother, Bailey Ningsu, Yun Luo. Yun Luo's surname wasn't Yun. She was only a servant of the Yun family. It was only because she was smart and vigilant in her actions and was loyal to the Yun family. She once saved her mother at the cost of being seriously injured and on the verge of death that she was recognized and valued by the Yun family. Since then, she was given the surname Yun by the Yun family and became her mother's trusted bodyguard. Yun Luo stopped in front of Yunyao and bowed. "Young miss, please wait." Yunyao stopped and looked at her with a slight frown. "Why are you stopping me?" Yun Luo looked at the street behind her vigilantly and pulled Yunyao into an alley. She stretched out her hand and shot out a 5-colored spiritual light, setting up a soundproof array formation to protect herself and Yunyao. Then, she said seriously, "Eldest young miss, this subordinate is here on Madam's orders to pass on a few words to you." "Mother ordered you to pass on a message?" Yunyao frowned and thought for a moment. Then, she said calmly, "Then tell me." Yun Luo also did not beat around the bush and said straightforwardly, "Eldest miss, just now, Ji Tianqing and the Son of Heaven had a decisive battle on the monarch stage." Madam secretly watched the entire process. The madam admitted that she had indeed misjudged him. She did not expect Ji Tianqing to have such hidden strength and means. Ji Tianqing was actually able to defeat the Son of Heaven and successfully pass the Monarch Mansion's examination. This made her feel very surprised. Yunyao nodded slightly and said indifferently, "Mother does not understand Tianqing. It is normal for her to misjudge him. However, she should have seen Tianqing's aptitude and potential now." Yun Luo did not respond. She did not comment on this and continued, "Madam said that Ji Tianqing defeated the Son of Heaven after all. Today, hundreds of thousands of people witnessed it with their own eyes. This matter has already caused a sensation in Central State City. It will definitely spread quickly. Now that Ji Tianqing has become famous in this battle, he is in the limelight. He will definitely become an influential figure in Central State City. He will definitely attract the attention of countless experts and powers. He is at the heart of the struggle and the Son of Heaven has yet to choose his heavenly concubine. Eldest Miss, you are still one of the candidates. If Eldest Miss goes to Ji Tianqing at this time, some people will definitely find out about this. It will also attract criticism from others, bringing unnecessary trouble to you and Ji Tianqing. Eldest Miss, please reconsider." After Yun Luo finished relaying Bailey Ningsu's words, he did not say anything else. He silently waited for Yun Yao to make her decision. Yun Yao frowned as she pondered with a solemn expression. Mother's words are reasonable. Today, Tianqing defeated Long Yunshao on the stage and became famous. He has already become a proud son of heaven that everyone looks at. If I go to Clear Wind Courtyard to look for him now, it will be a bit rash. When Tianqing fought with Long Yunshao, the people from the other two families will definitely come to watch. They will definitely keep an eye on Tianqing. If they find out that I went to look for Tianqing, it will give them an opportunity. They will definitely use this opportunity to slander and deal with Cloud Soul Palace. Tianqing has just come to Central State and has not established himself yet. It is not suitable for him to be involved in the grievances of the three great families. Thinking of this, Yun Yao dispelled her previous thoughts. She suppressed the worry in her heart and decided not to visit Ji Tianqing for now. Once the consort selection was over, she would no longer be a heavenly consort candidate and it would be convenient for her to move. In any case, Ji Tianqing would enter the Monarch Palace soon. At that time, she and Ji Tianqing would both be in the Monarch Palace and there would be plenty of opportunities to meet. In short, she and Ji Tianqing would have a long time in the future. There was no need to rush. At this time, Yun Luo saw that she had pondered for a long time and seemed to have made up her mind. He said, "Eldest Miss, please come with me to see Madam." Yun Yao did not say anything and nodded in agreement. She followed Yun Luo out of the alley and rushed towards a palace in the city. About an hour later, the two of them passed through a quiet street and entered a house at the end of the street. This fresh and elegant house looked calm and ordinary on the surface, but it was protected by a powerful formation and many powerhouses and guards were hidden. Yun Luo brought Yun Yao into a quiet and elegant room. He respectfully guarded the door and made a gesture of invitation. Yun Yao stepped into the room and saw her mother, Bailey Ningsu, sitting at the table and quietly pondering. There was a teacup and an incense burner on the table, and the air was filled with a calming fragrance. Yun Yao walked into the room and bowed slightly. She calmly called out, "Mother." Only then did Bailey Ningsu come back to her senses. She turned to look at Yun Yao and nodded slightly. "Yao Yao, come and sit down." Yun Yao walked to the table and sat down. Bailey Ningsu picked up the teapot and poured her a cup of spirit tea. Then, Bailey Ningsu slowly said, "Yao Yao, Ji Tianqing defeated the emperor on the monarch stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people. You must be very happy right now, right?" Yun Yao elegantly picked up the teacup and drank the tea. She remained silent and did not answer. Sigh. Bailey Ningsu sighed. She had a worried look on her face and her expression was solemn. "Mother, why are you so worried?" Yun Yao looked at Bailey Ningsu and asked with concern. Bailey Ningsu looked deeply at her and said in a solemn tone, "Ao Yao, the emperor was defeated in front of everyone today and was seriously injured. It affected the selection of the heavenly concubine." Chapter 527. Yunyao naturally understood Bailey Ningsu's meaning and guessed what her mother was worried about. However, she remained silent, lowering her head to drink tea. Bailey Ningsu furrowed her brows and said in a low voice, "In recent years, our Yun family has gradually declined, while the other two families have become increasingly prosperous, producing experts in large numbers. The three families have always been a tripartite balance of power. Even if they compete in secret, they won't join hands. I don't know when it started, but the Duanmu and Murong families have secretly joined hands to deal with our Yun family. In recent years, the two families have become increasingly arrogant and despotic. Their movements have become more frequent, and all kinds of schemes have emerged. If it weren't for the Son of Heaven secretly supporting our Yun family, how could we have resisted the two families' schemes?" Speaking up to hear, a cold glint flashed in her eyes, and her tone carried a trace of hatred. Those two families have actually joined hands and acted so arrogantly, unscrupulously dealing with our Yun family. There must be someone supporting and instigating them from behind. Yunyao's mind was sharp, and she immediately understood Bailey Ningsu's meaning. She furrowed her brows and said in a cold voice, "How many people in the entire central province have the qualifications and strength to control the two families? The person supporting the two families to deal with our Yun family must have an extraordinary status, and most likely comes from the imperial court. However, the imperial court has many heirs, so I wonder who the person behind the scenes is?" Bailey Ningsu nodded in agreement. "That's right. Mother has always suspected that the power behind the two families is most likely a descendant of the imperial court. However, we can't make wild guesses without concrete evidence." After a moment of silence, she solemnly exhorted, "Yao Yao, you've just entered the monarch manor not long ago and have yet to gain a firm foothold. The two families' heirs are deeply rooted in the monarch manor. You must remember to be careful in the monarch manor, and do your best to avoid conflict with the two families. As for Ji Tianqing, he'll definitely be targeted by the two families and be watched by many powers in secret. After Ji Tianqing enters the monarch manor, you must try not to get too close with him, so as to avoid being caught by those with ulterior motives. It won't be long before your father comes out of seclusion. When your father comes out of seclusion, we will discuss this matter and find a countermeasure." Hearing this, Yunyao frowned and asked Bailey Ningsu, "Mother, didn't you say that you wouldn't stop us if Tianqing joined the monarch mansion? Now that I am still a candidate for heavenly consort, I can temporarily not interact too much with Tianqing. However, once the emperor's concubine selection is over, I will be free. I am willing to associate with Tianqing. That is my freedom. How can I allow others to criticize me?" Bailey Ningsu looked at Yunyao helplessly and nodded, "That's right, mother did say that. However, Yao Yao, you must understand that the Monarch Palace is the best martial arts academy in the entire continent. That was a holy land for martial artists to cultivate, not a place for romance. If you are outside the Monarch Mansion, no matter how the two of you interact, as long as you don't cross the lightning pool, mother will not interfere or obstruct you. But in the Monarch Mansion, you must concentrate on cultivating and studying martial arts diligently. You must strive to increase your strength. This is the right path and will not be a waste of your great talent. In this world of martial arts where heroes rise and powerhouses stand in great numbers, only those with enough strength can have a foothold in this world and protect their loved ones and families. Yao Yao, even if mother doesn't tell you these principles, you should understand them." Yunyao lowered her head. After a moment of silence, she calmly replied, "Yao Yao understands. Mother, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Bailey Ningsu knew Yunyao's temperament the best. Seeing that she didn't answer directly, she knew that her words were perfunctory. However, she had already said what she needed to say. Since Yunyao didn't want to listen to her, there was nothing she could do. Sigh, Bailey Ningsu sighed helplessly and no longer talked about this matter. She then asked Yunyao about some things in the monarch mansion and gave Yunyao some advice. After a quarter of an hour, Yunyao finished drinking the spiritual tea in her cup. She bowed and bid farewell to Bailey Ningsu and returned to the monarch mansion. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and the others left the square in the city and returned to the Cool Breeze courtyard. After returning to the clear jade courtyard, Ji Tianqing entered a secret room in his room and began to circulate his martial arts to regulate his breathing and restore his vitality. Although he had defeated Long Yunxiao and severely injured him, he was still safe and sound. But in fact, Long Yunxiao's strength and methods were very powerful. He was far stronger than an ordinary second-level Sky Origin stage expert. If the Tianjian sect master, Gao Yi, hadn't died, he wouldn't have been able to withstand 3 moves from Long Yunxiao and would have been killed on the spot. In order to defeat Long Yunxiao, Ji Tianqing had used all his strength and used all his trump cards and secret techniques. His true origin stage was almost exhausted. Now that his true origin stage was exhausted and his strength was weak, he needed to recuperate for a few days to recover. In the dimly lit secret room, the spiritual energy gathering array was activated. It quickly absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from all directions and condensed it into strands of dazzling multicolored light in the secret room. Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged in the middle of the array, silently circulating the Sword Heart Dao's incantation. His body was like a vortex, crazily absorbing the spiritual energy around him. Just last night, with the help of Qian Yu and the help of the Beast King's spirit communication heaven art, he had successfully broken through the shackles and reached the Sky Origin stage. Now, he had officially entered the Sky Origin stage. His strength and martial arts realm had also improved and changed by leaps and bounds. In the future, not only would he have to cultivate the 8th level of the Sword Heart Dao, but he would also have to gradually control the power of the 5 elements to quickly increase his strength. The secret chamber was silent, and time passed quietly. Unknowingly, 3 days passed in a flash. Ji Tianqing cultivated for 3 days and 3 nights. Finally, he had recovered his true essence and his strength had returned to its peak state. Moreover, some of the minor injuries in his body had also been healed by the powerful self-healing ability of the Kenshin bloodline. Early in the morning, Ji Tianqing finished his cultivation and walked out of the secret room. Not long after he returned to his room, the Beast King entered Clear Jade Garden and came to his door. "Tianqing, have you come out of seclusion? This old man has received many invitations and visiting cards in the past 2 days. I've come to deliver them to you." The Beast King stood outside the door and shouted with a smile. Ji Tianqing quickly opened the door and welcomed the Beast King into the room. He asked curiously, "Senior, what invitations and visiting cards? I don't have any relatives or friends in Central State City. Who would send these things to me?" The Beast King immediately revealed a smile and explained, "After you defeated the Son of Heaven, you became famous and became a noble and unparalleled emperor. Now that you are a famous figure in Central State City, the various powerful families and organizations in the city naturally want to form a good relationship with you." Chapter 528. Ji Tianqing looked at the several dozen invitations and visiting cards on the table and couldn't help but knit his brows. Every invitation and visiting card was extremely luxurious and exquisite. It was clear that only powerful factions and families had the qualifications to use them. He casually flipped through a few invitations and visiting cards and found that the contents were mostly the same. They all had the same goal. Those factions and families in Central State City either sent people to the Cool Breeze courtyard to deliver visiting cards, as well as a valuable meeting gift, or they sent people to deliver invitations, inviting him to attend a banquet. These families and factions all wanted to rope him in and establish a good relationship with him. Ji Tianqing was not interested in this at all. Towards the various large factions and families in Central State City, he didn't have too much of an understanding. He casually flipped through a few visiting cards and invitations, but he found them to be uninteresting. He didn't feel like giving them another look. Seeing his reaction, the Beast King hurriedly reminded, "Tianqing, this old man knows that you are infatuated with martial arts cultivation and don't want to pay attention to these mundane matters. However, this old man must remind you that in this large Central State City, the network of relationships between factions is extremely complicated. As long as it is a family or faction with a bit of background and strength, they will move around and interact with each other, using this to expand their own influence. Tianqing, if you want to truly stand firm in Central State City, you will need a few backers and allies. How about this? This old man will give you a detailed introduction to Central State City, as well as what powerful families and factions there are. Then, you can choose a few that you are willing to make friends with and this old man will help you take care of them." The Beast King was extremely enthusiastic, introducing Ji Tianqing to Central State's large families and factions. However, Ji Tianqing waved his hand, rejecting the Beast King's good intentions. "Senior, I know that you have good intentions and I am very grateful. However, I will not interact with those families and factions, nor will I be recruited by them. Eagles can only soar in the sky if they spread their wings and fly alone. Only sparrows can form flocks. I ask Senior to help me reject those invitations and visiting cards." When the Beast King heard his words, he revealed a faint smile as he nodded and said, "Eagles soar high in the sky, sparrows flock together, these words are truly correct. Good. Since you've made up your mind, this old man will help you deal with it." The Beast King put away the dozens of invitations and visiting cards and left Clear Jade Garden. Next, he had to send people to reply to the visiting cards and invitations one by one. He also had to send back the gifts sent by the major forces and families. Although this was not a dangerous or difficult task, it was an extremely exhausting task. Of course, Ji Tianqing didn't have to worry about this. In any case, the Beast King was more familiar with the Central State, so it would be easier for him to deal with these matters. After Ji Tianqing sent the Beast King away, Ji Ku and Yen came to his room and chatted with him. More than half a month had passed since Ji Ku transformed into the Golden Raccoon demon race. Now that she had gradually grasped the method to control her demonic power, she usually hid her claws, ears, and tail. Her appearance was no different from that of a human in the past. When Ji Tianqing heard the news, he also felt gratified for her. At this time, Yen frowned and thought for a moment, then asked with some concern, "Senior brother Tianqing, you will enter the Monarch Mansion soon. But junior sister Ji Ku and I have nowhere to go, so we can only stay in Clear Breeze Courtyard. Once you enter the Monarch Mansion, you won't be able to go in and out at will. It will be difficult for us to see you in the future." Ji Ku also had the same thoughts and worries, nodding, "Yes, we have no relatives or friends in the Central State. Apart from Clear Breeze Courtyard, we don't know where else to go." Her eyes were full of reluctance, obviously unwilling to be separated from Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing saw that the two of them were a little sad and depressed, so he smiled and comforted them, "Don't worry, after senior brother enters the Monarch Mansion, I won't leave you alone. I saw in the Monarch Mansion before that each emperor's son has a spirit vein and a dazzling cave dwelling. Each emperor's son has his own family's trusted aides, as well as 1 to 200 guards and maids. They can both guard the cave dwelling and act as their guards when they go out. If you want to enter the Monarch Mansion with me, of course I can take you in. There shouldn't be any problem. However, in the Monarch Mansion, only the Emperor's son and God-tier masters have noble status. Those servants, trusted aides, and guards of the Emperor's son have no status." Hearing what he said, Ji Ku's eyes suddenly lit up, revealing a strong sense of expectation, and said excitedly, "Brother Tianqing, you can take us in? That's great. As long as we can follow you into the Monarch Mansion and not be separated from you, I'm willing to even give you maids and maids. Yen also showed a smile and nodded repeatedly. Senior brother Tianqing, I can be your attendant and guard. As long as you don't leave us, I'm willing to do anything. Ji Ku immediately laughed and joked, Cuckoo, Yen, one of you is the princess of the Qingyun kingdom, the other is the crown prince of the Hua clan. You want to be my maids and guards? I can't accept this. If others know, I'm afraid they'll say that I'm not strong enough and don't have a good reputation, but I'm arrogant and ostentatious. Ji Ku and Yen were amused, but they didn't care about the false reputation. Ji Ku chuckled and said, Brother Tianqing, we're just princes and princesses from small places. We're nothing in Zhongzhou city. Among the hundreds of thousands of people watching the battle in the square today, there might be thousands of princes and princesses. Yen also nodded in agreement. The emperor's son is the most honorable person in Zhongzhou, and even in the mysterious heavenly continent. To the cultivators and people of Zhongzhou, it's also a great honor to be the emperor's guard and maid. Although Ji Ku and Yen said these words as if they were joking. However, Ji Tianqing understood that the two of them really didn't care about their status and reputation. They just wanted to follow him into the monarch mansion. Therefore, he nodded and agreed to this matter. Cuckoo, Yen, the three of us left the sect together and came to Zhongzhou city. The three of us should enjoy blessings and endure hardships together. Since you don't mind, senior brother will of course take you into the monarch mansion. In the future, when you follow me, there's no need to call yourselves guards and maids. We're still brothers of the same sect. As long as I have something, I'll give you a share. Hearing his words, Ji Ku and Yen were even happier. The worries and concerns in their hearts finally dissipated. However, the three of them chatted happily for a while. Yen suddenly remembered something and his mood gradually fell. Ji Tianqing saw that he was hiding something, so he asked, Yen, what's wrong? Why are you unhappy? Yen hesitated for a moment before he whispered with a pout, Senior brother Tianqing, it's been 3 days since you defeated the emperor. No matter how busy senior sister is, she should have come to visit us, right? Did eldest senior sister forget about us after entering the monarch mansion? Ji Tianqing shook his head and comforted him with a smile, Yen, senior sister is not that kind of person. The monarch mansion is a holy land of martial arts. The rules there are strict. It's not a place where you can enter and leave as you wish. When we enter the monarch mansion, we have to be careful. We can't be rash and impulsive, so as to avoid being caught by people with ulterior motives. Senior sister must have her difficulties. Don't worry, after we enter the monarch mansion, we'll see her. Yen nodded and responded. Ji Tianqing revealed a smile and reminded him and Ji Ku, all right, go back and prepare. We'll enter the monarch mansion in 2 days. Chapter 529. In the southern region of Central State, in the sky-connecting mountain range. On the majestic sky-connecting peak was where the human imperial court was located. The 3 palaces, 9 halls, and 18 courtyards formed a majestic and sacred group of palaces. At this time, the emperor and the imperial tutor had just returned to the imperial court from Central State City. Inside the palace of heaven and earth, in the spacious and elegant imperial study, the emperor was wearing a noble and dignified golden dragon robe and a purple gold dragon crown. He was sitting in front of a large table, reading the memorials and letters on the table. He reached out and picked up a dark gold memorial and saw the words Heavenly Stellar Region at the bottom right. Oh! A memorial from the Heavenly Stellar Region? The emperor raised his eyebrows as a glint flashed in his eyes. He opened the exquisite and luxurious memorial and carefully read the contents. The memorial was filled with lines of vigorous and powerful words. There were at least tens of thousands of words written on it. Greetings to your majesty. I am the Sky Pillar Sect Master, Chu Tiansheng. I hereby present a memorial to your majesty to report the details of the Demon King's rebellion. 3 months ago, the Tianjian sect led the 4 great sects were bewitched by the remnants of the demon race and joined forces to besiege the Sky Pillar sect. Our sect's spirit vein array had long been destroyed by the remnants of the demon race, causing the array that sealed the Demon King to lose its power. When our sect was desperately resisting the 4 great sects, the Demon King took the opportunity to break the seal and reappear in the world. He started a massacre in our sect. Our sect and the 4 great sects suffered heavy losses. The Demon King killed thousands of martial artists and was about to condense the Demon King's true body. At the critical moment, our sect's elite disciple, Ji Tianqing, stepped forward bravely and faced the Demon King alone. He swore to protect our sect's disciples. When he read this, the emperor frowned and muttered in confusion, "Ji Tianqing? So it's him." The emperor revealed a look of realization and said with a complicated expression, "I didn't expect that the young genius who could defeat Yun Shao was actually an elite disciple of the Sky Pillar sect." He nodded slightly. He already had an idea in his heart, so he continued reading. Ji Tianqing possesses the bloodline of the Kenshin. Together with the strength of hundreds of martial artists from our sect, they finally managed to severely injure the demon emperor and force him to flee. When he saw these words, the emperor's pupils immediately shrank, and his face was filled with shock. He stared at the memorial in disbelief. He was silent for a long time with a face full of shock. Only then did he take a deep breath. Even with the exalted status of the human race supreme, when he saw that Ji Tianqing possessed the Kenshin bloodline, his heart was filled with shock and disbelief. He silently put down the memorial, and a look of understanding appeared on his resolute and dignified face. No wonder this child's talent is monstrous, being able to defeat Yun Shao and become the #1 genius of the human race. Kenshin bloodline. He actually has Kenshin blood. The emperor was silent for a moment before he ordered in a dignified tone, "Commander Yu, send a message to the imperial tutor. Tell him to come to the study for an audience. I have something important to discuss." The burly general guarding the door of the study immediately bowed and accepted the order. He left the study to pass on the order. It didn't take long for Commander Yu to return. Behind him was the emperor's preceptor, whose hair and beard were completely white. The imperial tutor held the golden horsetail whisk and entered the study. He came to the table and bowed to the emperor. "Your Majesty, may I know what instructions you have for me?" The emperor did not explain. He solemnly picked up the memorial and handed it to the imperial tutor. The imperial tutor glanced at the words Tianshan region on the memorial and vaguely understood something. He reached out to take the memorial and read it carefully. A moment later, when the imperial tutor saw the words Ji Tianqing and Kenshin bloodline in the memorial, his body also trembled. His face was filled with deep shock, and his eyes were surging with light. He looked at the emperor in disbelief and asked, "The elite disciple that Chu Tianqing mentioned, the one who injured the ancient demon emperor, is the one who defeated the Son of Heaven, Ji Tianqing? This child actually has Kenshin bloodline?" The emperor nodded solemnly. "That's right." The imperial tutor frowned. This old man had just sent people to investigate Ji Tianqing's background. "I didn't expect the results to come so quickly." However, it was 4 months ago that the ancient demon emperor broke the seal and started a massacre in the Sky Pillar sect. Why did Chu Tianqing only submit the memorial now? The emperor raised his eyebrows and explained, "This memorial was sent from the Sky Pillar sect a month ago. After all, it takes a month for the messenger to rush from the Sky Pillar sect to the imperial court. Moreover, before the demon emperor broke the seal, Chu Tianqing was ambushed by a demon expert and was seriously injured, so he had to go into seclusion. By the time he came out, the matter had already passed, and he was busy rebuilding the sect, so the time to submit the memorial was a bit late." "I see." The imperial tutor finally understood the reason and nodded. He said solemnly, "Half a year ago, this old man discovered that Kenshin's fated star had lit up again, so I sent people to the 9 southern regions to look for it. However, many guards and secret agents searched bitterly for half a year without any results. I didn't expect that someone had inherited the Kenshin bloodline. No wonder they couldn't find any clues related to the Kenshin." After pausing for a moment, the imperial preceptor frowned and said, "This old man has read many legends about the sword god in the history books. Many of them recorded that the sword god had an ultimate sword technique. It was to summon a huge sword that could split the heaven and earth from the 9 heavens and use its supreme divine might to kill the enemy. I don't know if the emperor still remembers that during the battle between Ji Tianqing and the Son of Heaven today, Ji Tianqing used the final move, sword comes, slash. It's very similar to Kenshin's ultimate sword technique. This old man boldly speculates that after Ji Tianqing inherited the Kenshin bloodline, he might have also inherited the Kenshin's ultimate technique." The emperor recalled the scene at that time and immediately nodded in agreement. "That's right. The sword technique that Ji Tianqing used today is indeed very similar to Kenshin's ultimate technique. If this boy has really inherited the Kenshin's ultimate technique, then he can be regarded as the Kenshin successor. At our level, we all know how miraculous and powerful Kenshin's ultimate technique is. Therefore, Ji Tianqing must be used by our human race." The imperial tutor nodded solemnly and stroked his beard. "That's right. With Ji Tianqing's unparalleled aptitude and talent, coupled with the cultivation of Kenshin's ultimate technique, he will soon become a world-famous powerhouse. If he can be used by our race, then it will be a blessing for our human race. If by any chance he is roped in by the monster race or the water race and joins their forces, then the consequences will be unimaginable." Speaking up to here, the imperial tutor respectfully cupped his hands and bowed to the emperor. He said in a sincere tone, "Emperor, this old man earnestly requests the emperor to secretly take action to resolve the enmity between Ji Tianqing and the Son of Heaven. No matter what, we can't let the enmity between them continue to develop, and we can't let Ji Tianqing become our enemy." Chapter 530. The emperor naturally nodded in agreement with the imperial tutor's serious advice. He nodded slightly and said with a serious expression, "The imperial tutor is right. Yun Shao was defeated by Ji Tianqing in front of everyone. His reputation has been damaged and his prestige has been greatly reduced. There would definitely be many people criticizing him, and there would even be some rumors and slanders. For so many years, Yun Zhao's life has been smooth and he has not encountered any obstacles. This emperor is worried that he is young and impetuous and cannot accept this result. He will form a grudge with Ji Tianqing." The imperial tutor stroked his beard and said in a serious tone, "Therefore, this matter needs to be secretly resolved by the emperor." The emperor already had a plan in mind. He took out a piece of golden paper from the table and began to write a letter to the emperor. As he wrote the letter, he also read the contents of the letter out loud so that the imperial tutor could also know the inside story. "My son, Yun Shao, seeing words is like seeing a face." The battle on the emperor stage was the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone knows about it. I have also received the news and results. Yun Shao, ever since you stepped into martial arts cultivation at the age of 4, it has been smooth sailing for the past 20 years. However, there was always someone who was better than him. No matter who it is, they will have to experience failure. Even a peerless powerhouse like Kenshin cannot remain undefeated for his entire life. He will eventually encounter setbacks. Yun Shao, this emperor hopes that you can face your opponent head-on and use this setback to motivate yourself to work harder. This emperor also hopes that you can bury the hatchet with Ji Tianqing. Don't lose the big picture for the small things and have conflicts with Ji Tianqing again. You and Ji Tianqing are the top geniuses of our race. In the future, you will become the pillars of our race and fight against the other races. If you can understand, respect, and support each other, and even become good friends, that is what this emperor wishes for. It is also a blessing for our race. When the emperor put down his brush, he had also finished reading the contents of the letter. He stamped the golden paper and placed the letter in an envelope. He then used a secret technique to seal it. The imperial tutor smiled and nodded. This is good. When the emperor sees the letter, he will definitely understand what to do. Emperor, I will send someone to deliver the letter to the Son of Heaven. As he spoke, the imperial tutor reached out to take the envelope. However, the emperor waved his hand and said, "There's no hurry. This emperor still needs to write another secret letter. Later, send someone to deliver it to the monarch residence." Imperial residence? The imperial tutor was stunned for a moment before he immediately understood. The emperor's letter is for that prince? Not bad. The celestial emperor nodded and said, 3 years ago, this emperor arranged for him to enter the monarch manor and let him secretly monitor the movements of the various princes and make preparations for Cloud Sky to enter the monarch manor. In addition, this emperor also asked him to secretly protect and assist Yun Xiao. This person is a hidden chess piece that this emperor placed in the emperor's mansion. If used properly, he will definitely be of great use. The emperor lowered his head as he wrote the letter. He said, Ji Tianqing will enter the monarch manor soon. This emperor wants him to secretly keep an eye on Ji Tianqing and think of a way to get close to Ji Tianqing. From Ji Tianqing, he can find clues related to Kenshin. He also needs to investigate clearly for this emperor whether Ji Tianqing has really inherited Kenshin's secret technique. Compared to Kenshin's bloodline, Kenshin's secret technique is the most mysterious and terrifying thing. After all, once Kenshin's secret technique appears, it will be enough to shake the entire profound sky continent. Hearing the emperor's plan and arrangement, the imperial tutor nodded and said, "That's right. With the emperor's careful arrangement and treatment, it should be foolproof." Then, he took the 2 secret letters from the emperor's hands and bowed to bid farewell to the emperor. He then sent someone to deliver the letters. Very quickly, 7 days passed. In these 7 days, the central state city was bustling with noise and excitement. All kinds of rumors and slanders were spreading everywhere. The battle between Ji Tianqing and Long Yunxiao had already spread throughout the central state city. It had reached the point where even women and children knew about it. Not only were all the powerhouses, families, and martial artists talking about the battle between the two, but they were also talking about it. Even the common people on the streets and alleys were talking about it with great relish. Also, the news had spread out of the central state city and was spreading in all directions at a rapid speed. Ji Tianqing's name finally resounded throughout the central state land. Everyone knew about him and he had also become one of the influential figures in the central state land. Long Yunxiao, the emperor of the imperial court who received a lot of attention, had his reputation plummeted. He had almost become the laughingstock of all the powerhouses and martial artists. Countless people were criticizing and laughing at him behind his back. All kinds of slanders emerged one after another. Of course, the powerhouses, martial artists, and common people only dared to slander and criticize him behind his back. They would never dare to speak it out in the open. In these 7 days, Long Yunxiao did not show himself. He did not hold a ceremony to select a heavenly concubine, nor did he announce the date of the selection. Everyone in the outside world guessed that Long Yunxiao's injuries were too serious and he was in seclusion to recuperate. This morning, everyone in the cool breeze courtyard gathered in the conference hall. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yan had already made preparations. They were going to the monarch mansion today. In the hall, Ji Tianqing led Ji Ku and Yan to salute the Beast King. He said with a sincere expression, "Senior Beast King, the 3 of us are going to the monarch mansion today. Thank you for taking care of us all this time. This junior will remember it in his heart." The Beast King quickly raised his hand, indicating Ji Tianqing to dispense with the formalities. He said with a smile, "Nephew Tianqing, this old man and your master are as close as brothers. What's this little help?" "Tianqing, the monarch mansion is sacred and dignified. There are many rules and geniuses of various races and descendants of wealthy families. The relationship between the forces is very complicated. After you enter the monarch mansion, you must be careful in everything. Don't be impulsive and reckless. You must plan slowly." The Beast King exhorted with concern. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Ji Ku listened attentively and remembered it in their hearts. After he finished speaking, White Ape stepped into the hall and cupped his hands to report to him, "Master, we're ready and can set off at any time." Hearing White Ape's words, Ji Tianqing raised his brows and asked the Beast King in puzzlement, "Senior, are you leaving too?" The Beast King nodded slightly and said with an amiable expression, "That's right. Now that the three of you are going to enter the monarch mansion to cultivate, this old man is also going to leave for a while and return to Beast King Valley. This time, I'm going back to Beast King Valley to deal with some matters. I don't know when I'll be able to return. This mansion is this old man's property. After this old man leaves, there will be guards guarding it. During this time, if you leave the monarch mansion, you can also stay in the Qingfeng courtyard temporarily." "Thank you, Senior." Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yan cupped their hands to thank the Beast King again. Then, the three of them bid farewell to the Beast King and left the Qingfeng courtyard, heading straight for the Forest of Divine Monuments in the city. After they left, the Beast King also left the Qingfeng courtyard with White Ape and rushed back to the Tianshan region in the south. Announcing a VIP reader group number, 258620646. Brothers with fan points are welcome to join the group. If brothers have any questions, little he will answer them in the group. Chapter 531. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing brought Ji Ku and Yan to the Forest of Divine Steels. The three of them passed through the Forest of Divine Steels and walked along the black stone path to the end. They arrived at a majestic ancient door. Ji Tianqing looked up at the words, "Ancient Emperor," above the door and smiled. "Emperor's mansion, here I come," he said in his heart, and took out the purple crystal token from the space ring to open the defensive array that sealed the door. Swoosh! With a flash of colorful light, the colorful barrier opened to both sides and a white light door appeared. Ji Tianqing brought Ji Ku and Yan through the light door and entered the Emperor's mansion. The next moment, the three of them appeared on a vast grassland. Ji Tianqing had been to the Emperor's mansion before and was familiar with the scene in front of him. Ji Ku and Yan, on the other hand, looked around curiously. In this vast world, there were vast grasslands and majestic mountains, as well as vast forests and lakes and rivers. It was full of spiritual qi. Seeing this scene, the two of them revealed excited expressions and exclaimed in surprise. "This is the most mysterious Emperor's mansion on the continent. I didn't expect that I could come here. What a beautiful place, isolated from the rest of the world." Ji Tianqing saw the two of them cheering and said with a smile, "From now on, we will live here. In the future, you will have time and opportunity to enjoy the beautiful scenery in the Emperor's mansion. But now, let's go and report to Divine Master He Yu and settle down first." After that, he turned the Kenshin battle robe into a pair of golden wings and flew into the sky with Ji Ku. They flew toward the majestic mountains in the distance. Yan took off the fire jade bracelet from her wrist and released the wildfire white tiger from it. She rode the white tiger on the grassland and followed Ji Tianqing to the mountains in the distance. Not long after, the three of them entered the vast mountains and encountered a team of experts in black armor. These people were the guards of the imperial residence, responsible for patrolling and guarding the imperial residence. There were 10 guards in this group, and all of them had the strength of the Yuan Dan stage. Moreover, they were riding on spirit birds. After the captain of the guard stopped Ji Tianqing, he asked about his identity and purpose before leading him to the Black Feather Palace. 2 hours later, the guard captain led Ji Tianqing and the other two up the cloud-shrouded Blackfeather Peak and arrived at the gate of Blackfeather Palace. According to the rules of the imperial residence, only Ji Tianqing could meet with divine teacher Blackfeather. Ji Ku and Yen had to wait outside. Ji Tianqing entered the spacious and bright hall alone. He saw the black-robed and black-haired divine master He Yu meditating in the hall with his eyes closed. He walked to the center of the hall and stood still. He cupped his hands and bowed to divine teacher Blackfeather. Crown Prince Ji Tianqing greets divine teacher Blackfeather. Divine teacher Blackfeather opened his eyes and looked at him calmly. He nodded slightly and said, "Ji Tianqing, I have arranged everything for you. As the 56th Crown Prince, you can have a spirit vein and a cave residence. You can also arrange for no more than 200 followers and servants." Divine teacher Blackfeather's expression was calm as he explained his arrangements. Ji Tianqing then knew that the mountain range 400 miles to the southwest of the Black Feather Palace had become his territory. It was named the Tianqing Mountain Range. A palace had been built on the mountain range. It was named the Tianqing Palace. It would be the cave residence where he would cultivate in the future. After that, divine teacher Blackfeather asked him for the purple crystal token. Divine teacher Blackfeather added more than 10 formations and restrictions on the token before returning it to him. This purple crystal token had become the real Crown Prince's token. With the Crown Prince's token, Ji Tianqing could enter and leave the Crown Prince's estate. He could activate the various formations and restrictions of the Tianqing Mountain Range and Tianqing Palace. After divine teacher Blackfeather finished talking about the cave residence, he said with a stern expression, "Ji Tianqing, check your own cave residence in a bit, and then go to the Open Cloud Palace to see the divine teacher. You have been assigned to the Open Cloud Divine Teacher. From today onwards, the Open Cloud Divine Teacher will be responsible for teaching you martial cultivation." After he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing bowed respectfully and said, "Thank you, divine teacher Blackfeather. I understand." Afterwards, he bowed to divine teacher Blackfeather and left the Black Feather Palace. After leaving the Black Feather Palace, he brought Ji Ku and Yen with him. Under the guidance of the captain of the guards, he hurried to the Tianqing Mountain Range in the southwest. When the three of them arrived at the Tianqing Mountain Range and saw the situation in the mountain range, they were all rather excited. They saw that this spirit vein was located at the southwest edge of the mountain range. It was over 100 kilometers long. The entire mountain range was covered in lush, primitive forests, and there were over a dozen peaks and several valleys. There was a surging river at the foot of the mountain, and there were waterfalls thousands of meters high in the valleys. It was as if the mountain range had been hung with jade ribbons and pearls. It was a very magnificent and beautiful sight. The peaks of the mountains were shrouded in white clouds and thick fog. It seemed like a dream, and its aura was ethereal and otherworldly. On the tallest mountain peak of the mountain range, there was a magnificent palace that occupied an area of 10 miles. This was the Heavenly Palace. The Tianqing Palace sat in a vast sea of clouds. There were even multicolored auspicious clouds lingering above it. Such a magnificent palace seemed like a heavenly palace. The three of them arrived outside the Tianqing Palace and examined the palace up close. Beneath their feet was a path paved with black stone. In front of them was a square that was 1,000 meters in radius. After passing through the square, they would arrive at the gates of the Tianqing Palace. The towering palace gate, which was 100 meters tall, was built with dark green boulders and set up with a powerful defensive formation. On the lintel directly above the palace gate, the words, Tianqing Palace, were carved in flamboyant calligraphy. It exuded a noble and powerful aura. "From now on, this is my territory. I finally have my own spirit vein and cave abode. Ji Tianqing looked at the majestic palace with a gratified smile in his eyes. Then, he led Ji Ku and Yen through the square and walked to the palace gate. He opened the palace gate with the emperor's token and led the two of them into the palace. There were 3 courtyards in the Tianqing Palace. There were 3 majestic palaces that covered an area of more than 1,000 meters. Around the 3 main palaces, there were rows upon rows of houses and buildings. There were also 2 beautiful gardens and 2 lakes that were as clear as mirrors. There were thousands of houses of various sizes in the entire Tianqing Palace. Not to mention 100 or 200 attendants and guards. Even if thousands of people lived in it, it would not feel crowded. Ji Ku and Yen walked in the huge Tianqing Palace. Their hearts were filled with shock and amazement. They could not help but cheer in surprise. Brother Tianqing, your cave abode is bigger and more luxurious than the imperial palace of the royal Azure Kingdom. Yen also nodded and praised, Senior Brother Tianqing, even the imperial palace of our fire tribe can't compare to your cave abode. The spiritual energy and resources here are too rich. It's simply the perfect cultivation ground. Chapter 532. Ji Ku and Yen were extremely excited. They walked around Tianqing Palace, looking around curiously. Ji Tianqing had the two of them stay in Tianqing Palace to familiarize themselves with the palace's environment first. He left Tianqing Palace and followed the captain of the guards to Open Cloud Palace. On the way to Open Cloud Palace, he thought to himself, I wonder what race that Open Cloud Divine Master is from, and what he looks like. How many princes does he have under him? And how does he usually teach the princes how to cultivate? Ji Tianqing was still very unfamiliar with the imperial residence, and did not understand the situation there. Before today, he only knew of Divine Master He Yu. He had not even heard of the other 9 Divine Masters. He was naturally filled with curiosity and doubt about the Open Cloud Divine Master that he had yet to meet. 2 hours later, Ji Tianqing arrived at Open Cloud Peak in the middle of the mountains under the captain's guidance. He landed outside Open Cloud Palace. The guard captain bowed to him and took his leave. Ji Tianqing tidied up his clothes and long hair, and walked towards the gates of Open Cloud Palace alone. There were a few guards standing guard at the gates. After they stopped him, they asked him about his identity and his purpose for coming. He showed his imperial token, and the guards let him pass, allowing him to enter Open Cloud Palace. He passed through the gates of the palace, followed the clean and tidy path, passed through the first courtyard, and entered the majestic palace. As soon as he entered the main hall, he saw 4 noble and handsome princes standing in the main hall. These 4 princes were all extraordinarily handsome youths, but they came from different races. 2 of them were human youths, and the other 2 were foreign youths. The 4 of them stood quietly in the main hall, deep in thought. They seemed to be listening to instructions. Ji Tianqing's gaze passed over the 4 of them, and looked towards the seat of honor in the main hall. He saw a black-robed, dignified middle-aged human man sitting on a dark golden throne inlaid with jade. This person was tall and burly, and his facial features were as angular as a rock. He exuded a resolute and dignified temperament. Especially his deep eyes, they were calm and indifferent, and they contained the extraordinary bearing of an expert that looked down upon all living beings. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed that this black-robed man should be the Clear Cloud Divine Sage. At this moment, the Clear Cloud Divine Master was currently explaining the mysteries of a certain internal cultivation method to the 4 princes, dissecting the essence of the cultivation method. His voice was slightly low and deep, and it contained a sense of solemnity and seriousness, causing those who heard it to feel deep veneration and listen attentively. Ji Tianqing strode into the hall and stood still in the middle. He bowed towards the Clear Cloud Divine Sage and said, I, Emperor Ji Tianqing, have just entered the imperial residence today. I've come to pay my respects to the Clear Cloud Divine Sage. The Clear Cloud Divine Sage stopped teaching and looked at him calmly. He sized him up a few times. The four princes also looked at Ji Tianqing with different expressions as they observed him silently. A while later, the Clear Cloud Divine Sage nodded slightly and said to Ji Tianqing, you've already paid your respects to the Divine Sage Heiyu, right? Ji Tianqing replied honestly, yes. The Divine Sage Heiyu has already arranged a dwelling for me and assigned me to be under your command. The Clear Cloud Divine Sage nodded and said sternly, correct. From today onwards, you are one of the princes under my tutelage. I will teach you martial cultivation. There are a total of 10 divine sages in the imperial residence. As a great divine sage, the divine sage Heiyu has never personally taught the princes. The current 56 princes are taught by me and the 8 divine sages. Every divine sage has a few princes under them. In the future, if you have any questions or problems with cultivation, you can come to the Clear Cloud Palace to ask me for guidance. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He said calmly, the princes have just entered the imperial residence. I hope that the divine sage Clear Cloud Divine Sage can guide and take care of me in the future. The divine sage Clear Cloud Divine Sage nodded and continued, now that you are under my tutelage, you can come to the Clear Cloud Palace at any time. You will not be restricted or obstructed. However, if you have any matters or questions about cultivation and want to see the other divine sages, you must first hand over an invitation and wait for the divine sage's notice. There are many rules in the imperial residence, and they are very strict. The relevant books have already been prepared in your dwelling. Once you return to your dwelling, you can take some time to read them carefully. You need to understand the rules of the residence as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing clasped his hands and bowed. He said, as you wish, divine sage. The divine sage Clear Cloud Divine Sage then looked at the four princes in the hall. He said sternly, from today onwards, Ji Tianqing is the 5th prince under my tutelage. The 5 of you will also become fellow disciples. Get to know each other first. Hearing this, the 4 princes all looked at Ji Tianqing, revealing different expressions. The prince who spoke first was actually not one of the 2 human youths. Instead, he was a 2-meter-tall demon wearing a white fox fur coat. This person had a head of silver hair, and his face was handsome and resolute. His silver eyes exuded a mysterious and unruly aura. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a smile and clasped his hands. He said playfully, Ji Tianqing, we meet again. When Ji Tianqing saw his appearance clearly, he could not help but reveal a sliver of astonishment. Kuan-Wu. I didn't think you would also be under the divine sage Clear Cloud Divine Sage's tutelage. Kuan-Wu only smiled and nodded. He did not say anything. Immediately afterwards, a human youth wearing luxurious blue robes and holding a green jade fan clasped his hands and greeted Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, I am Murong Lingfeng. From now on, we will be fellow disciples. If you have any difficulties, feel free to come find me. Hearing this clear voice, Ji Tianqing subconsciously looked at Murong Lingfeng. When he saw Murong Lingfeng's appearance clearly, he was instantly stunned. A strange look flashed through his eyes. This was because this prince named Murong Lingfeng was actually born with a picturesque appearance. His skin was delicate, and his appearance was as beautiful as a peerless beauty. If it were not for his masculine voice, Ji Tianqing would have almost mistaken him for a woman. He had a smile on his face, and there was a hint of tenderness and goodwill in his eyes. Ji Tianqing politely declined the flirtatious look in his eyes. He clasped his hands expressionlessly and said, Many thanks, Brother Murong. At this moment, another human youth stepped forward and clasped his hands at Ji Tianqing with a smile. Junior Brother Ji, I am Ling Yichuan. If you have any needs in the future, feel free to tell me. This young man named Ling Yixian had a tall figure and a handsome face. He had the appearance of a distinguished and elegant young master, and he had a rather carefree and forthright air about him. Like Murong Lingfeng, he expressed goodwill to Ji Tianqing. His expression and eyes were very sincere, and would not cause others to be wary. Ji Tianqing also smiled and returned the greeting. He said to him, "Many thanks, senior brother Ling." The last prince was from the water tribe. His skin was dark, and fine scales could be faintly seen on his arms and neck. This person's appearance was ordinary, and his temperament was somewhat cold and gloomy. Chapter 533. Ji Tianqing greeted the four princes, exchanging names and becoming acquainted with them. Although appearance couldn't represent a person's character, good or evil, but Ji Tianqing's first impression of these four people was different, and he already had a sense of propriety and calculation in his heart. After Ji Tianqing greeted the four people and exchanged some pleasantries, the Clear Cloud Divine Sage said, "Today's morning class ends here. You can all withdraw." Ji Tianqing and the four princes bowed and bid farewell to the Clear Cloud Divine Sage, then turned and walked out of Clear Cloud Palace. After leaving Clear Cloud Peak, Ji Tianqing flew into the sky, returning to Tianqing Palace. However, he had just flown 1,000 meters when Murong Lingfeng caught up and blocked his path. "Junior apprentice brother Ji, please wait." Murong Lingfeng flew in front of him, holding a green jade folding fan and cupping his hands in greeting. "Junior apprentice brother Ji, that day when you challenged Long Yunxiao on the monarch stage, I was also there to watch. At that time, the situation wasn't suitable, so I didn't congratulate you on the spot. Now, I'll add a few words of congratulations to you, junior apprentice brother." Murong Lingfeng congratulated Ji Tianqing with a smile on his face. His words and actions were quite intimate. Of course, while he acted intimate on the surface, there was a hint of coldness and arrogance hidden in the depths of his eyes. Obviously, he didn't really take Ji Tianqing seriously. Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and cupped his hands in thanks, then turned to leave. Murong Lingfeng saw his cold reaction and couldn't help but frown. He stopped him again and said with a smile, "Junior apprentice brother Ji, I heard that you're not from the middle state, and seem to have come from the 9 regions of the south. Now that you've just entered the monarch manor, you definitely don't have any attendants or maids by your side. Not only does this damage your status as a prince, it's also quite inconvenient for you to do things. It just so happens that I've recently recruited a group of capable guards, as well as a dozen or so young and beautiful maids. If junior apprentice brother Ji doesn't mind, I'll gift those guards and maids to you, so you don't have to worry about these trivial matters." Murong Lingfeng's words were clearly meant to use actions to express goodwill and win over Ji Tianqing. As long as one wasn't an idiot, one would be able to understand his intention of roping them in. However, Ji Tianqing didn't seem to understand what he meant as he calmly cupped his hands and said, "I appreciate brother Murong's good intentions, but I have always liked peace and quiet, so I don't need a maid to serve me. If brother Murong doesn't have any other matters, then I'll take my leave." After saying that, Ji Tianqing ignored Murong Lingfeng's urging to stay, turned around, and flew away. Murong Lingfeng watched as his figure disappeared into the sea of clouds. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and his expression became somewhat gloomy. "Humph. A lowly commoner from one of the 9 territories of the southern continent actually dares to refuse this young master's good intentions? You truly don't know how to appreciate favors." He cursed angrily before turning around and leaving. Murong Lingfeng was born in the Murong family and was the son of the first wife of the Murong family. How noble was his status! In his eyes, the southern continent's 9 territories were poor and desolate lands. Only the central state was a bustling place. People who walked out of the southern continent's 9 territories were lowly commoners. Furthermore, he was ranked 7th in the emperor manor. His strength and status were both very high. Many princes revered him. Who dared to refuse his roping in and getting close to him? Ji Tianqing actually didn't know what was good for him and didn't give him any face. This made him a little angry in his heart. However, Murong Lingfeng calmed down very quickly and suppressed the anger in his heart. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he thought to himself, Ji Tianqing defeated Long Yunxiao in front of everyone and even seriously injured Long Yunxiao. In these few days, everyone in the central state city was talking about Long Yunxiao. His reputation was damaged, and the prestige of the Son of Heaven also plummeted. With Long Yunxiao's arrogant personality, he definitely won't be able to swallow this anger. He will definitely fight Ji Tianqing to the death. Sooner or later, he will find Ji Tianqing for revenge. Although Ji Tianqing has shocking talent and strength, he is a lowly commoner without any background or backing. It will be very difficult for him to gain a foothold in the central state. Even if this brat doesn't know how to appreciate favors and temporarily refuses to accept my invitation, I can't give up so easily. I must think of a way to win him over. If I can pull him under my command and use him to deal with Long Yunxiao, that would be the best. If I let him deal with Long Yunxiao, I can complete the Lord's plan and it won't implicate the Murong family. It's the best of both worlds. Furthermore, even if Ji Tianqing knows that I'm using him, he can't do anything about it and can only swallow his anger. How could a lowly commoner without any backing like him dare to make an enemy out of the Murong family? He. Thinking of this, the cold smile on Murong Lingfeng's lips became even wider and his eyes revealed a pleased look. 2 hours later, Ji Tianqing returned to Tianqing Palace. He entered the first courtyard's guest hall and sat down to chat with Ji Ku. At this time, Yan quickly walked into the hall and said to Ji Tianqing, "Senior brother Tianqing, Kun Wu has come to find you. He's waiting outside the door." "What's he doing here?" Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment before saying, "Yan, bring him in." "Okay." Yan responded and quickly turned around to leave the hall. Not long after, Yan brought Kun Wu back to the hall. Kun Wu walked in front of Ji Tianqing with a smile and cupped his hands in greeting, "Junior brother Ji, I trust you've been well since we last met." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands in return and extended his hand to make a "please" gesture, indicating that he should sit down and talk. "Kun Wu, what business do you have with me?" After Kun Wu sat down, he smiled and said, "This monarch has come to find you for 2 matters. The first is to congratulate you on passing the examination and successfully entering the monarch mansion." "Thank you." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, "What's the second matter?" Kun Wu turned his head to look at Ji Ku and smiled, "In addition to congratulating you, this monarch also wants to see Ji Ku." He looked at Ji Ku with concern. After sizing him up a few times, he asked, "Ji Ku, you can already hide the characteristics of our Golden Raccoon clan. It seems that you've already escaped danger and learned how to control your demon power." If it was a month ago, Ji Ku would still have some disgust and resistance towards Kun Wu. However, now that she had accepted her identity as a member of the Golden Raccoon clan, she could face everything calmly. When she saw Kun Wu again, she didn't feel as disgusted as before. She nodded to Kun Wu and said in a calm tone, "Thank you for the pill you gave me before." Kun Wu waved his hand and said with a smile, "It's nothing. Don't mention it." "Ji Ku, this monarch still has a few more pills and a secret cultivation method of the Golden Raccoon clan. If you cultivate according to this secret cultivation method, not only will you be able to quickly refine your demon power, but it will also allow you to quickly increase your strength. It will be faster than cultivating human martial arts." As he spoke, Kun Wu took out a small white jade bottle and a simple yellow secret manual from his interspatial ring. Ji Ku didn't reach out to take it. He turned his head to look at Ji Tianqing and asked for his opinion with his eyes. Chapter 534. Since Ji Tianqing had agreed, Ji Ku naturally did as she was told. She accepted the medicinal pills and secret manuals from Kun Wu, nodded to Kun Wu, and thanked him. Kun Wu could see that Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku no longer held any hostility towards him, so he heaved a sigh of relief. He said in a sincere tone, Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, if you encounter any difficulties in the monarch mansion, feel free to come to Kunwu Palace to look for me. As long as it is within my power, I will definitely help you. Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku both smiled and expressed their gratitude to him. Kunwu didn't say anything else and got up to bow and take his leave. You've just entered the monarch mansion, so you must have a lot of things to do. It's inconvenient for me to disturb you, so I'll take my leave. Ji Tianqing got up to see him off and asked Yan, to send him out of Tianqing Palace. Silence was restored in the hall as Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku sat down to talk. The two chatted for a while and were talking about the layout of Tianqing Palace and the two gardens. At this time, Yan walked into the hall again with a letter in her hand and came to Ji Tianqing. Senior Marshal Brother Tianqing, just as I sent Kunwu away, a woman came to the outside of the palace and asked to see you. She claimed to be eldest Senior Marshal sister's maid and specially sent a letter, asking me to personally hand it to you. A letter from eldest Senior Marshal sister? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows slightly and muttered in confusion. If she wanted to see me, she could have come directly to Tianqing Palace. Why would she send a maid to deliver a letter? As he spoke, he reached out and took the letter from Yan. After opening the envelope, he took out the letter and carefully read it. The letter paper made of hibiscus was tough and delicate, and it contained a faint fragrance. The content of the letter was very little, only a line of beautiful words. Tianqing, I'll be waiting for you by Yunxiu Lake. I have something to discuss with you. Ji Tianqing kept the letter in his spatial ring. Then, he said to Ji Ku and Yan, eldest senior sister is looking for me. You two stay in the palace and don't leave. I'll be back soon. Ji Ku and Yan both nodded to show that they understood and gave him a few instructions. Ji Tianqing quickly left Tianqing Palace and flew into the sky. He flew towards Yunxiu Lake as fast as lightning. The elegant cloud lake was a clear and bright lake with a radius of 100 miles. It was located in the southeast of the mountains and was hidden by a few mountain ranges. Ji Tianqing didn't quite understand why Yunyao wanted to meet him there. However, he knew that Yunyao had her reasons for doing so. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing flew above Yunxiu Lake and looked down at the situation below. He saw that Yunxiu Lake was surrounded by several towering mountain ranges, and the lake was covered with white clouds and thick fog. Looking down from the sky, it was impossible to see the lake's surface and the lakeside. The environment here was secluded and very few people came here. It was very secluded. Ji Tianqing landed on the lakeside and stood on a green grassland. He keenly looked around for Yunyao's figure. At this moment, a clear and melodious voice suddenly came from behind him. Tianqing, I'm here. Ji Tianqing quickly turned around and saw a beautiful woman in a white dress standing under a willow tree 100 steps behind him. It was Yunyao. Yunyao had been waiting for him under the willow tree. She didn't show up until he came. Ji Tianqing quickly walked to the willow tree and stood in front of Yunyao. He smiled and said, Yao Yao, I'm here. Yunyao nodded and said in a soft tone, Tianqing, long time no see. How are you doing? Were you injured when you fought with Long Yunxiao on the monarch stage that day? Ji Tianqing gently shook his head and said, I'm fine. I've made you worry. Yao Yao, why didn't you go to Tianqing Palace to find me? Instead, you asked to meet me here? Yunyao calmly explained, Tianqing, the relationship between the major forces in the central state is a little complicated. It's hard to explain it clearly in a short time. Cloud Spirit Palace is now in a dangerous situation, and you and I are also at the heart of the struggle. That's why I didn't visit you before. Even if you entered the Monarch Palace, I couldn't go to Tianqing Palace to find you, so as to avoid being discovered by people with ulterior motives. However, there are some things that can't be explained in a letter. I have to tell you in person, so I can only take the risk and ask to meet you here. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, Yao Yao, you don't have to explain anything. I understand that you have your own considerations and difficulties. It's good that you can understand. Yun Yao's eyes revealed a touch of gratification. Then, she said with a serious expression, Tianqing, now that you have entered the monarch palace, if you want to establish yourself in the central state city, you have to understand the power structure of the central state. In our human race, the strongest is the imperial court, followed by the three great families. These three ancient families, other than our cloud spirit palace, there is also the Murong family and the Duanmu family. For many years, the three great families have been in a tripartite balance of power, fighting both openly and covertly. However, the three great families are independent of each other and have always maintained a balance. However, in recent years, there seems to be a mastermind behind the scenes who is plotting something, actually making the Murong and Duanmu families work together to deal with our Yun family. The Yun family is gradually declining, while the Murong and Duanmu families are becoming more and more arrogant and despotic, becoming more and more unrestrained. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Then, he said with a serious expression, if there really is a mastermind behind the scenes controlling the two great families, then the mastermind behind the scenes must be terrifyingly powerful. A power that can make the two ancient families bow their heads. I'm afraid, it's related to the imperial court, right? Yun Yao looked at him with some surprise and nodded, Tianqing, I didn't expect you to understand so quickly. You guessed right. Mother and I have also analyzed that the mastermind behind the scenes is most likely a descendant of the imperial court. However, the imperial court has many descendants. Other than the emperor, there are also several princes, princesses, and kings. Before we have conclusive evidence, we can't determine who is the mastermind behind the scenes. Ji Tianqing frowned and said in a serious tone, this matter involves the imperial court's descendants. Your Yun family must be careful and not make the slightest mistake. Otherwise, it will be a great disaster. That's right. Yun Yao nodded and said with a serious expression, therefore, the Yun family's current situation is worrying. Mother is also very worried about this matter. Tianqing, you have become famous in this battle. After becoming the emperor, you will definitely be targeted by the two great families. The Murong family's legitimate son, Murong Lingfeng, and the Duanmu family's Duanmu Yulong, both of them are in the emperor manor. Moreover, they have been in the emperor manor for many years and have already built a deep network of forces. You must be on guard against the people from the two great families. Don't have any contact with them. No matter how they behave, no matter how sincere they are to you, they must have other motives and schemes. Hearing Yun Yao's serious warning, Ji Tianqing came to a realization and nodded, so that's how it is. Chapter 535. Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Yun Yao immediately furrowed her brows, and a trace of worry flashed across her eyes. Tianqing, you just entered the monarch mansion today, and Murong Lingfeng already came to find you? Murong Lingfeng is actually so impatient. It seems like he has long been plotting something. Ji Tianqing revealed a playful smile and explained, today, I went to meet God Sage Heiyu, and was assigned to God Sage Clear Cloud's tutelage. Coincidentally, Murong Lingfeng is also under God Sage Clear Cloud's tutelage. When he saw me for the first time, he clearly had a good impression of me and wanted to get close to me. At that time, I felt that it was strange. This person and I have never met before, so why would he be so friendly to me for no reason? Now that I think about it, this person most likely wants to use me, right? After speaking, he stared at Yun Yao and said solemnly, Yao Yao, don't worry. I originally had no intention of befriending those aristocratic families and powers. Murong Lingfeng expressed his goodwill to me, but I already rejected him. Since the Murong family and Duanmu family have other plans, it's even more impossible for me to interact with them. Furthermore, I will be careful to guard against them and not give them a chance to take advantage of me. Yunyao nodded and said, Tianqing, it's good that you understand. Although the monarch mansion is a holy land of martial arts, it's not a peaceful place for cultivation. The relationships and situation in the mansion are also very complicated. There are more than 50 princes in the mansion, and they come from various powers, aristocratic families, and imperial courts of the 3 major races. They all have different camps and goals. Although everyone looks calm on the surface, there are actually turbulent undercurrents. For so many years, they have been fighting openly and covertly. Yunyao briefly explained the situation in the monarch mansion and reminded Ji Tianqing to be careful. Ji Tianqing listened attentively. After she finished speaking, he looked at her with a gentle gaze and said calmly, Yao, actually, before this, I never thought of entering the monarch mansion, nor did I think of obtaining the fame I have today. All of this originated from what your mother said. She told me that only by entering the monarch mansion and becoming a noble prince would I have the right to interact with you. From that moment on, I decided that no matter what, I had to enter the monarch mansion. I don't care about the glory and prestige of becoming a prince, nor do I care about the reverence and worship of the people. I only care about you. Yunyao's heartbeat sped up as she was stared at by his gentle yet firm gaze. A hint of gentleness appeared in her eyes. She nodded and stared at Ji Tianqing and said, Tianqing, I understand your intentions. Everything you did, all of this for me. You are not a prince of the aristocratic family's mansion, of course. But, Yun's is heaven is, because the future, there will be bloodsheds of heaven. There is no way. You. Ed edition. Edzs we, s. Ji Tianqing nodded and said firmly, that's right. The grudges of the 3 aristocratic families, the situation between the different clans, and the fight in the monarch mansion are all earth-shattering. But, even if I am a lone boat, I must ride the wind and break the waves, moving forward courageously. Life is like a game of chess, and I am willing to be a pawn. Although my actions are slow, who has seen me take half a step back? When he said these bold words, an invisible aura of an expert was emitted from his body. He was quite persistent and confident. Yunyao looked at him with shining eyes. She stretched out her slender fingers to hold his hand and said solemnly, No, Tianqing, you are not a lone boat. I will always be by your side, and we will weather the storm together. The 2 of them looked at each other and saw the determination and persistence in each other's eyes. After a long time, Yunyao let go of Ji Tianqing's hand and said in a low voice, Tianqing, we should go back. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a moment. Seeing that Yunyao was about to leave, he said, Yao, there is something I want to tell you. Yunyao asked calmly, what is it? Ji Tianqing said in a low voice, actually, Long Yunshao is not a hateful person. He is not a bad person. Although he is cold and arrogant on the surface, I can see that he is sincerely good to you. In order to make you happy, he has made a lot of sacrifices in secret. Maybe you don't need to hate and be hostile to him. I think he is a good friend. Yunyao was startled for a moment, then nodded and said, Yes, I know what you said. Long Yunshao is not a hedonistic son of a rich family, nor is he a vicious and sinister person. He is many times more outstanding than the children of the aristocratic families. Moreover, he has inherited His Majesty the Emperor's demeanor and bearing. He is highly regarded by the Emperor. Speaking up to here, she paused for a moment and looked deeply at Ji Tianqing. Then, she continued in a calm tone, Actually, I don't really hate him. I just don't have any romantic feelings for him. Since I am destined not to be with him, I can't be pleasant to him and show him any good feelings. I can't give him hope and fantasy, lest he misunderstand and have some unnecessary misunderstandings, which will delay our time. That's why I deliberately avoided him and treated him coldly for so many years. I just want him to give up completely and cut off his thoughts so that he doesn't have to persist in his obsession. Maybe I am a little cruel, but in my opinion, this is the best way. Being indecisive and giving others hope and fantasy, and then extinguishing it with your own hands. That is the cruelest way. After listening to Yunyao's words, Ji Tianqing understood her intention. He nodded and said, "So that's how it is. I hope Long Yunxiao can let go of his obsession as soon as possible. This should be a kind of release for him." I hope so." Yunyao nodded and waved goodbye to Ji Tianqing. She took out the jade hairpin from her hair bun and turned it into a pair of wind and fire wings. She flapped them and flew into the sky, leaving graceful Cloud Lake. Ji Tianqing watched her figure disappear into the sea of clouds. Then, he turned and flew back in the direction of Tianqing Palace. Not long after the two of them left graceful Cloud Lake, a tall and sturdy figure appeared in the sea of clouds above the lake. This person was a young man of about 30 years old from the human race. He had a handsome and resolute face. He wore a luxurious green robe and his entire body exuded a noble and dignified aura. He was the 9th prince of the emperor's residence, the first son of the Duanmu family, Duanmu Yulong. Duanmu Yulong frowned and stared in the direction Ji Tianqing left with a sinister sneer on his face. Ji Tianqing, this brat, indeed has an extraordinary relationship with Yunyao. When he first barged into the emperor's residence, I could tell that he had something going on with Yunyao. Fortunately, I was careful and kept an eye on his whereabouts. I didn't expect that on the first day he entered the emperor's residence, he would have a private date with Yunyao by graceful Cloud Lake. Chapter 536. Since the day Ji Tianqing challenged Long Yunxiao, Duanmu Yulong had been paying attention to Ji Tianqing. In the past few days, he had already sent people to secretly monitor Ji Tianqing's every move. Moreover, when Ji Tianqing entered the monarch mansion, he personally monitored Ji Tianqing. His keen intuition told him that there must be some secret between Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Now, Duanmu Yulong had indeed found the scene of Ji Tianqing and Yunyao meeting in secret. He had a premonition that Ji Tianqing's appearance could bring about a favorable turn for their plan. Furthermore, Ji Tianqing might become the breakthrough point for them to deal with the Yun family and Long Yunxiao. Thinking of this, Duanmu Yulong sneered and turned around to enter the boundless sea of clouds, leaving graceful Cloud Lake. He flew across the sky as fast as lightning, heading straight for the exit of the monarch mansion. 2 hours later, he quietly left the monarch mansion. Swish! With a flash of light, Duanmu Yulong appeared outside the majestic gate. He looked around and saw that there was no one in the divine steel forest, so he used a secret technique to quietly change his appearance. Although he only slightly adjusted the outline of his facial features, his appearance had undergone a subtle change, so no one would recognize him at a glance. He put on an ordinary black robe and quickly passed through the divine steel forest, rushing towards a certain place in Central State City. About half an hour later, Duanmu Yulong entered a quiet and cold palace. The palace was dimly lit, and many experts and powerhouses were hiding in the dark. Duanmu Yulong walked all the way to the depths of the palace and arrived outside a dark secret room. 2 black-robed guards guarding the door silently stopped him and coldly stared at him. These 2 guards were actually heavenly origin stage powerhouses. Their auras were ice-cold, and their bodies emitted a faint murderous aura. Duanmu Yulong was very clear about the rules. He quickly took out his identity token and handed it over to the black-robed guards for inspection. After the 2 guards verified his identity, they opened the array at the door of the secret room and respectfully reported to the inside of the secret room, "Lord, Duanmu Yulong requests an audience." The gloomy secret chamber was silent. After a while, a strange voice that was neither male nor female sounded. "Let him in." The black-robed guard bowed. After leaving the secret room, he made a "please enter" gesture to Duanmu Yulong. Duanmu Yulong's whole body flashed with brilliance and the black robe disappeared. His facial features also changed slightly and quickly returned to normal. When he stepped into the secret room, he had already changed back to his original appearance. He was wearing a long green robe and had a handsome face. Inside the dimly lit secret chamber, there was a dense five-colored spirit chi. A burly man in a golden robe and a dark purple cloak was standing in the secret room with his back to him. The golden-robed man exuded a noble and dignified aura as he quietly stared at the array diagram on the wall, seemingly contemplating something. Duanmu Yulong quickly bowed and respectfully said, "Duanmu Yulong greets Lord." The Lord was still staring at the array diagram on the wall. Without turning his head, he said in a low voice, "No need for formalities." Duanmu Yulong quickly straightened up and respectfully asked, "Lord, I wonder what you ordered me to come here?" The Lord leisurely said, "In recent days, a boy named Ji Tianqing has become the new emperor and is about to enter the monarch mansion. Keep a close eye on this boy. If you can find a good opportunity, get rid of him as soon as possible to avoid future troubles." The Lord's voice was low and gentle, but it contained an unquestionable majesty. After Duanmu Yulong heard it, he immediately showed a surprised expression. He obviously did not expect that the Lord's order was to deal with Ji Tianqing. Why would a great figure with such a noble status like the exalted Lord pay attention to Ji Tianqing? Ji Tianqing is just a despicable person from the 9 southern regions. Even if he has become the emperor, he is still a rootless duckweed. He can't enter the Lord's eyes. Why would the Lord pay attention to him and ask me to find a chance to get rid of him? What is this boy Ji Tianqing's background? Does he have another identity or background? Duanmu Yulong was full of doubts and did not understand the Lord's order. But since the Lord had given the order, he naturally had to follow it. Moreover, since the Lord did not want to disclose the information, he did not dare to ask. "Lord, please rest assured. I will follow your order." Duanmu Yulong cupped his hands and respectfully said, "Lord, I have been secretly watching Ji Tianqing for the past few days. Today, I found a clue. Today is the first day Ji Tianqing entered the monarch mansion. I saw him having a private rendezvous with Yunyao. The two of them seemed to be close." The Lord did not seem to be surprised when he heard the news. His tone was still cold and deep. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao are both disciples of the Sky Pillar sect. The two of them are fellow disciples of the same sect. It is normal for them to be close to each other. Duanmu, the situation in the monarch mansion is complicated. If you want to make a move on Ji Tianqing, I'm afraid it will be difficult to find a good opportunity. If you want to kill someone with a borrowed knife or kill someone without spilling blood, you might as well use your brain and use the relationship between Ji Tianqing and Yunyao to make a fuss. Hearing the Lord's advice and reminder, Duanmu Yulong's eyes flashed and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a sinister sneer. He nodded and quickly cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your advice, Lord. I know what to do. Moreover, I will complete the mission as soon as possible and will not disappoint the Lord." Very good. The Lord nodded slightly, seemingly satisfied with his reaction and attitude. "If there is nothing else to report, you may leave." "As you wish." Duanmu Yulong bowed and said goodbye to the Lord. He then turned around and left the secret room. After Duanmu Yulong left, the secret room returned to darkness and silence. Only then did the Lord slowly turn around. His appearance was the same as usual. He was wearing a half-crystal mask on his face. His appearance and features could not be seen clearly. Only a pair of unique red phoenix eyes could be seen. "Humph. Ji Tianqing, I will let you live for a few more days. This Lord will soon send you to see the King of Hell. Anyone who hinders this Lord's footsteps will all die without a burial place." The great Lord murmured in a low voice as a cold light flashed in his eyes. At the same time, Duanmu Yulong left the mysterious palace. He changed into a black robe and changed his facial features. Then, he quietly returned to the monarch mansion. On the way back, he was silently calculating in his heart, although our Duanmu family is the same as the Murong family, we work hard for the Lord. However, our Duanmu family will not fall behind the Murong family. We can't let the Murong family snatch the credit. The Lord personally summoned me and entrusted me with such an important task. He must think highly of me and doesn't trust that coquettish Murong Lingfeng. I must get rid of Ji Tianqing as soon as possible and do this beautifully. I must not disappoint the Lord. Chapter 537. 3 days passed by very quickly. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yan had already adapted and familiarized themselves with the environment of Tianqing Palace. In addition, the three of them had already read the rules of princes, so they had a sufficient understanding of the rules and laws of the monarch estate. During these 3 days, Tianqing Palace was peaceful and quiet. No one came to disturb Ji Tianqing and the others. It wasn't until the morning of the 4th day that Ji Tianqing left Tianqing Palace and rushed to Open Cloud's peak as fast as lightning. Today was the day of the Open Cloud's divine sage's morning lesson. Ever since Ji Tianqing entered the monarch estate, this was the first time he was listening to the teachings of the Open Cloud's divine sage. Naturally, he couldn't be absent or late. When the sun rose, Ji Tianqing arrived at Open Cloud's palace and strode into the main hall. 2 princes had already arrived in the spacious and bright main hall. Ji Tianqing recognized them with a single glance. They were the human race's prince, Ling Yishan, and the icy water race's prince, Yu Zichen. He entered the main hall and stood next to the 2 of them. Yu Zichen glanced at him expressionlessly. He had no intention of greeting him. On the other hand, Ling Yishan smiled slightly at him and nodded slightly in greeting. Ji Tianqing also nodded at Ling Yishan in response. Then, he waited in silence. Before long, Kun Wu and Murong Lingfeng entered the main hall one after the other. Both of them were conceited and disdained to pay attention to Ling Yishan and Yu Zichen. However, both of them greeted Ji Tianqing, showing their closeness. Ji Tianqing had received Yun Yao's reminder and knew of Murong Lingfeng's identity and objective. Now, when he saw Murong Lingfeng's hypocritical attitude, he felt more and more that this person was hypocritical. He didn't want to pay attention to him. However, Murong Lingfeng didn't care about his cold attitude at all. He didn't feel awkward at all. Half an hour later, the black-robed Open Cloud's divine sage entered the main hall. He walked to the seat of honor and sat down. Ji Tianqing and the 4 princes all bowed, paying their respects to the Clear Cloud Divine Master. The Clear Cloud Divine Sage nodded slightly and said calmly, "Today, I will talk about the peak of martial arts and the legendary realms of martial arts. Being the Emperor's children, in the future, you will be influential figures within the Tianxian land. You will even become the top elite warriors of the land. And the prerequisite to becoming a peak expert is to have foresight, to have a deeper understanding of the martial Dao realms and levels." Ji Tianqing had heard that the divine masters in the imperial residence would not teach specific cultivation methods and secret techniques. The god-tier masters would not interfere with the cultivation of the imperial princes. Only when the princes encountered difficulties in their cultivation and sought guidance from the god masters would the god masters be able to explain and guide them. Usually, the content taught by the divine masters were all different martial arts stories, ancient legends, and secrets of the Tianxian land. After listening to a god-tier master's lecture, the princes would often be able to broaden their horizons and increase their knowledge. This point was different from ordinary sects, and was also the uniqueness of the imperial residence. Only within the imperial residence could one come into contact with more martial arts legends and ancient secrets. Only then could one have the opportunity to climb to the peak of martial arts and reach a higher realm. Ji Tianqing looked at the clear cloud divine master with a calm expression and listened seriously. The clear cloud divine master said with a serious expression, "Currently, in the Tian Xian land, those at the Tian Yuan stage are considered elite warriors. Princes who reached the Tian Yuan stage at such a young age are already influential figures. And the refined soul stage above the Tian Yuan stage is a supreme elite warrior in the eyes of all. Just like me and the other divine masters, in the eyes of ordinary people, we are the strongest warriors of the land. But in reality, that is not the case. Ordinary martial artists are short-sighted and have shallow knowledge. Above the refined soul stage, there are the primordial soul stage elite warriors." Primordial soul stage? Hearing this, Ji Tianqing was instantly interested. His heart was filled with curiosity and doubt. The clear cloud divine master explained in a low voice, "As everyone knows, refined soul stage elites have surpassed the limits of their physical bodies and begun to cultivate their souls. Once they reach the refined soul stage, they can cultivate their souls and strengthen their soul power. They possess all sorts of inconceivable abilities." What are abilities? They are abilities that are inconceivable in the eyes of ordinary people, like those of gods. For example, they can tread on water and fire, fly in the sky and burrow into the ground, control wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, move mountains, control blades and swords to kill from a distance, and so on. Furthermore, if the physical body of a refined soul stage elite is destroyed, as long as their soul does not die, they can reform a physical body and continue to live. Normally speaking, elites who reach the refined soul stage can live for 500 to 1,000 years. In the eyes of ordinary people, they are like gods. Ji Tianqing had heard the burial of heaven talk about the refined soul stage before, but there were only a few sentences. He did not have a thorough understanding of it. Now that he heard the clear cloud divine master's explanation, he was enlightened and had a clearer understanding of the refined soul stage. At this moment, the clear cloud divine master continued, "And the primordial soul stage is an even stronger warrior above the refined soul stage." What is the primordial soul stage? The primordial soul stage refers to the primordial soul stage, while the primordial soul stage refers to the mind and soul. Only by fusing one's primordial soul stage with one's mind and soul can one form an extraordinary primordial soul. Primordial soul stage elites are lifeforms of a higher level. They have a lifespan of more than 1,000 years, and they have even more powerful abilities. For example, the legendary primordial soul stage and primordial soul stage Dharma idol. Elites at this level can leave their physical bodies and roam the world with their primordial soul stage Dharma idol. They can gather the power of heaven and earth from thousands of miles away, call the wind and summon the rain, and change the world. After hearing the clear cloud divine master's explanation, Ji Tianqing learned about the existence of the primordial soul stage and how powerful it was. Anticipation and yearning grew in his heart. Seeing the prince's fascinated expressions, the clear cloud divine master continued, "In the current Tianxian continent, there are only 2 or 3 known elites who have reached the primordial soul stage. However, do you think the primordial soul stage is the peak of martial arts? No. Above the primordial soul stage, there are even higher levels, the 9th tribulation stage, the martial sage stage, and the martial god stage. The so-called 9th tribulation stage is the shackles of heaven and earth. The test of the 9 heavens is the greatest test to become a supreme expert of martial arts. If you want to become a godlike elite, you have to withstand the bombardment and baptism of the heavenly tribulation divine lightning 9 times. Only by surviving can you reach the extraordinary martial sage realm. As for the martial god realm, it's a realm close to that of a god." At this moment, Ling Yichuan suddenly asked, "Clear Cloud Divine Master, I heard that 1,000 years ago, the strongest human was called Kenshin. I wonder if that senior Kenshin was the legendary martial god realm? How did an elite like Kenshin die? To be able to defeat and kill the sword god, what realm has his strength reached? Upon hearing Ling Yichuan's question, the princes stared intently at the clear cloud divine master, waiting for his answer. After all, the princes had all heard of Kenshin's name and knew some of the legends of Kenshin. Chapter 538. When Kenshin's name was mentioned, the clear cloud divine artifact's expression also became solemn. He looked at Ling Yichen with a dignified gaze and said in a heavy voice, "Kenshin was the most powerful person of the human race 1,000 years ago, and our residence has already been established for almost 10,000 years, continuing from the ancient times until now. I'm afraid that in the entire continent, only our monarch's residence understands Kenshin's legendary deeds the best. However, Kenshin's life story is our residence's greatest secret, and we cannot reveal too much. I can only tell you with certainty that Kenshin is a powerhouse that has surpassed the martial god realm. The strength of a godlike powerhouse isn't something you or I can imagine. Moreover, powerhouses at that level won't truly die." Ling Yichen immediately frowned, revealing a face full of doubt. He instinctively asked, "If I may ask, Clear Cloud Divine Artifact, do you mean that Kenshin hasn't died?" Kuan Wu, Murong Lingfeng, and Yu Zichen also looked at the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact expectantly. Clearly, they were very concerned about this question. Only Ji Tianqing remained expressionless, but he vaguely understood the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact's meaning. However, the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact ignored the prince's gazes filled with curiosity and didn't answer Ling Yichen's question. "With your current strength, it's still unknown whether or not you can reach the soul-refining realm. Isn't it a bit too ambitious to explore the realm above the martial god realm right now? It's not just you. Even I and the few nascent soul powerhouses on the continent can't reach Kenshin's realm. This is because there are still no supreme martial arts in this world that can allow someone to reach the realm above the martial god realm." Hearing the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact's words, the gazes of Kuan Wu, Ling Yichen, and the others all dimmed, revealing deep disappointment. Ling Yichen pondered for a moment, then asked, "Clear Cloud Divine Artifact, could it be that you can't even learn Kenshin's supreme martial arts?" The Clear Cloud Divine Artifact frowned and looked at him with a dignified gaze. He thought to himself, why does this Ling Yichen have so many questions today? How strange. However, his expression did not change as he said in a deep voice, "Ling Yichuan, ever since Kenshin's fall, no one in this world has obtained Kenshin's ultimate art, nor has anyone cultivated it. I can't answer your question." "Thank you, Divine Master." Ling Yichen bowed respectfully and did not ask any more questions. Ji Tianqing remained silent as usual, and his expression did not change much. In reality, after listening to the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact's explanation, waves of shock surged in his heart. He was filled with shock and excitement. Only now did he truly understand how powerful the Kenshin was, and how high their status was. To think that there are martial saints and martial gods in this world. In fact, Kenshin has even reached the realm above martial god. Other than Kenshin, no one else in the world could reach such a level. The fact that I was able to obtain Kenshin's tomb and cultivate Kenshin's secret arts is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and a great fortune. This is even more so the greatest gift and care that the heavens have given me. I will definitely cultivate Kenshin's secret arts even more diligently. I hope that I can be like Kenshin in my lifetime and reach the realm above martial god, exploring the limits of martial arts. Ji Tianqing's heart surged with emotion, and he secretly made up his mind. Afterwards, the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact told everyone about the various abilities of the soul-refining realm and the primordial spirit realm, as well as the legends of many senior powerhouses. Everyone listened attentively, yearning and worship growing in their hearts. At the same time, their horizons were broadened. 2 hours later, the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact finished telling the stories of the powerhouses, and announced the end of today's morning class. Ji Tianqing and the 4 princes bowed to the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact in unison, then turned and left the Clear Cloud Palace. After leaving the Clear Cloud Palace, the princes flew into the sky, returning to their respective abodes. Ji Tianqing had just flown a few kilometers when a call came from the vast sea of clouds behind him. "Junior apprentice brother Ji, please wait." Ji Tianqing stopped in his tracks and turned to look at the sky behind him. After seeing who it was, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. This person wasn't Murong Lingfeng, but Ling Yichen, who had given him a pretty good first impression. Ling Yichen flew to his side and stood still, smiling as he said, "Junior apprentice brother Ji, during the morning class just now, I saw that your expression was calm, as if you had a card up your sleeve. It seems that junior apprentice brother Ji is very familiar with the realm of martial arts and the legends of Kenshin? And I've always admired Kenshin greatly, so I'm very interested in his legends. May I ask what junior apprentice brother Ji thinks of what the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact said?" Ji Tianqing frowned slightly, looking calmly at Ling Yichen, and said, "Senior apprentice brother Ling, you think too highly of me. I'm not a disciple of a noble family, and I've just entered the imperial residence. Today is also the first time I've heard of such a profound realm of martial arts. As for what the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact said, my thoughts are the same as everyone else's. I admire and yearn for it, that's all." Although Ji Tianqing's impression of Ling Yichen wasn't bad. He knew very well that none of the princes who could enter the imperial residence were ordinary people. None of them were easy to deal with. In the complicated imperial residence, it was taboo to talk too much with someone who didn't know each other. After Yun Yao's reminder, he had always been cautious and guarded against the other princes. How could he possibly talk too much with Ling Yichen? And yet, Ling Yichen looked like he was eager to learn. He said somewhat unwillingly, "Junior apprentice brother Ji, we're both disciples of the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact, so we're brothers. We'll have to take care of each other in the future. It's normal for us to discuss and communicate with each other after class. You don't have to be so guarded, do you? If junior apprentice brother Ji knows of Kenshin's legends and deeds, why don't you share them with me? We can exchange information." Ji Tianqing looked at him with an indifferent expression, shaking his head and saying, "Even the Clear Cloud Divine Artifact can't dispel your doubts, so what can I talk to you about? If senior apprentice brother Ling doesn't have any business, then I'll take my leave." He cupped his hands towards Ling Yichen, turned around, and flew away. Ling Yichen saw his cold attitude that kept people at arm's length, but he wasn't angry or annoyed. He stood in the sky, watching Ji Tianqing's back disappear into the depths of the sea of clouds. He muttered in a low voice, "This guy's very guarded. But there's still plenty of time in the future. Let's see how long you can endure this." Finished speaking, he turned around and flew away with a smile. An hour later, Ji Tianqing returned to Tianqing Palace. He had just stepped through the palace gates when he saw Ji Ku, Qian Yu, and Yan all in the courtyard. Ji Ku was sitting cross-legged in the empty space in front of the palace. He seemed to be cultivating some kind of cultivation technique. Her aura was wild and chaotic, and her complexion constantly changed. Sometimes it was as pale as snow, and sometimes it was as golden as paper. Qian Yu and Yan surrounded her, looking at her with concern. The two of them watched Ji Ku cultivate as they whispered into each other's ears, discussing something. When they reached a critical point, the two of them actually stuck to their own opinions and argued. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing vaguely felt that something was amiss. He hurriedly walked over to inquire about the situation. Chapter 539. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had returned, Yan and Qian Yu immediately stopped arguing. Ji Ku, who was cultivating, also quickly stopped and opened her eyes. With a worried look, she quickly came to Ji Tianqing and said, "Big brother Tianqing, there's a problem with the cultivation art I'm cultivating." Ji Tianqing nodded and quickly comforted her, "Ku, don't worry. Tell me the details slowly." Ji Ku truthfully said, I'm cultivating the Golden Raccoon clan's secret art that Kunwu gave me. It can indeed improve my strength quickly, but it also strengthens the demon power in my body. The demon power in my body is becoming more and more violent and is gradually getting out of control. I'm afraid that if I continue to cultivate, my demon power will soon go out of control, so I don't dare to cultivate the Golden Raccoon clan's secret art anymore. However, when I cultivate the original human race's cultivation art, the world's spiritual energy I absorb clashed with my demon power, causing it to become even more violent. I've already tried to change several cultivation arts just now. Qian Yu and Yen also helped me think of a way, but they all failed without exception. Big brother Tianqing, what should I do? Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. He then said with a solemn expression, whether it's the Golden Raccoon clan's secret art or the original human race's cultivation art, you can't cultivate them now. It seems that there's a problem with the demon power in your body. I can't do anything about the cultivation problem of the demon race, so I can only find a demon powerhouse to solve it. Ji Ku looked up at him and asked with a puzzled expression, Big brother Tianqing, you mean, to find Kunwu? Yeah, Ji Tianqing nodded and said, let's go. I'll take you to Kunwu Palace to find him. Then, he took Ji Ku and left Tianqing Palace, flying across the sky as fast as lightning. The two of them flew for 200 miles and crossed several mountain ranges before arriving at the Kunwu mountain range where Kunwu was located. Swish! The two of them landed on the mountain peak and walked toward the gate of Kunwu Palace. There were more than a dozen demon clan guards guarding the gate. They only let Ji Tianqing in after asking him about his identity and purpose. Under the guidance of a guard, the two of them passed through the gate and entered Kunwu Palace. The guard led the two of them through the first courtyard and into the guest hall. Please wait here for a moment. Allow me to report to His Highness. The guard bowed respectfully before turning around and leaving the main hall to report the news to Kunwu. Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku sat in the guest hall and waited for a while. Then, they heard footsteps outside the hall. The two of them turned to look at the entrance of the main hall and saw that it was Kunwu. Kunwu quickly walked into the main hall. Before he sat down, he revealed a concerned expression and asked, Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, did you encounter any trouble when you came to find Benjun? Ji Tianqing didn't bother with pleasantries and went straight to the point. That's right. Kuku's cultivation has a problem. She's cultivating the Golden Raccoon clan's secret technique that you gave her. It can indeed increase her strength, but it also makes the demon qi in her body more violent. He explained the situation in a concise manner. After Kunwu heard this, he frowned in worry and looked at Ji Ku with concern. Ji Ku, Benjun needs to check the situation first to know what's going on. Ji Ku nodded and didn't refuse. Thus, Kunwu raised his right hand and put his index and middle fingers together like a sword. He used the demon clan's secret technique and sent a streak of dark silver demon qi into Ji Ku's forehead. He controlled the streak of demon qi and sent it through Ji Ku's meridians to check the situation inside his body. However, the demonic power he used was quickly blocked by the mysterious demonic power in Ji Ku's body. Kunwu used the secret technique again and again to increase the power of the dark silver demon qi. However, he still couldn't resist Ji Ku's mysterious demon qi. 100 breaths passed, but Kunwu didn't make any progress. He also couldn't detect Ji Ku's situation. Helpless, he could only use all his demon qi to rush toward the mysterious demon qi in Ji Ku's body. The two powerful demonic powers collided with each other in Ji Ku's body, and a muffled bang was heard. At that moment, Ji Ku's body trembled. His face turned pale, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Unable to withstand the power of the collision between the two demon qi, he closed his eyes and fell unconscious. Kunwu's expression changed drastically. He quickly retracted his demon qi and looked at Ji Ku anxiously and worriedly. At that moment, a silver crescent mark suddenly appeared on Ji Ku's fair and tender forehead. The crescent mark was like a birthmark, but it emitted a faint silver glow. It looked extremely mysterious and noble. When Kunwu saw the crescent mark, his body trembled. His eyes widened, and a look of disbelief flashed across his eyes. His expression was complicated. Other than shock, there was also a trace of surprise. However, the crescent mark on Ji Ku's forehead only appeared for a breath before it disappeared. Ji Tianqing saw that Ji Ku was injured and unconscious. He was also worried and anxious. He quickly asked, "Kunwu, what's going on?" Kunwu only came back to his senses when he heard his shout. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Ji Tianqing, don't worry too much. Ku is fine. She's just unconscious." Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at him. He asked again, "How's the demon qi in Ku's body? Is there a way to solve it?" Kunwu nodded solemnly and said in a serious tone, "Ji Tianqing, I roughly know what's going on with the demon qi in Ji Ku's body. However, with my strength and methods, I'm still unable to solve the mysterious demon qi for her. If I want to solve her problem completely, I can only bring her back to the demon clan and ask Father to save her." Ji Tianqing frowned. Bring her back to the demon clan? Ask the demon emperor to save her? Kunwu saw that he was hesitating, so he persuaded, "Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku's current situation isn't too serious. As long as my father helps, he can still save her. However, if we delay any longer, when the demon qi in her body completely breaks the seal, even the deities won't be able to save her. Then, there's really no way to save her." Ji Tianqing pondered silently for a moment. He then said solemnly, "Kunwu, I'll remember what you said. When Ku wakes up, I'll pass on your words to her and let her consider and decide for herself." "That's good too." Kunwu nodded and didn't say anything else. After that, Ji Tianqing carried the unconscious Ji Ku and left Kunwu Palace. After he and Ji Ku left, Kunwu was still sitting in the main hall. His eyes were fixed on the sky outside the hall. Kunwu's expression was somewhat complicated. After pondering for a long time, he muttered to himself, "Little sister, is it really you? Are you back?" No one could answer his question. For the time being, he couldn't confirm the doubts in his heart. Chapter 540. After Ji Tianqing brought Ji Ku back to Tianqing Palace, he placed her in a room and let her sleep peacefully. Xian Yu stayed in the room to take care of her in case anything unexpected happened. Ji Ku slept for half a day and only woke up in the evening. Seeing that she had woken up, Xian Yu hurriedly went to inform Ji Tianqing. Although Ji Tianqing was meditating and cultivating, he kept thinking about Ji Ku's situation. After hearing the news, he hurriedly rushed to Ji Ku's room. "Ku, how are you feeling? Are your injuries serious?" Ji Ku had just woken up and her eyes were still a little drowsy and hazy. She rubbed her eyes and gradually woke up. She gently shook her head and said, "Big brother Tianqing, don't worry. I'm fine." Ji Tianqing was relieved when he saw that her breathing was stable and that there was no demonic power in her body. He thought for a moment and said, "After you fainted, Kunwu told me that he can't solve your problem either. If he wants to completely cure you, he can only bring you back to the demon race and ask his father, the demon king, to help. Also, your current situation isn't too serious. As long as the demon king helps, your problem can be completely solved. If this drags on..." Ji Tianqing conveyed Kunwu's words to Ji Ku word for word. After Ji Ku heard it, she shook her head with a determined expression and said, "No. Big brother Tianqing, I don't want to go to the demon race. I'd rather not cultivate the secret techniques of the Golden Raccoon clan and not become a powerful martial artist than leave you. I won't go to the demon race. I want to stay by your side." Sigh. Ji Tianqing sighed and tried to persuade her again, "Cuckoo, even if you go to the demon race, we'll only be separated temporarily. Once your problem is solved, you won't have to worry about the demonic power in your body anymore. When that time comes, you can return to my side and never leave again, okay?" Ji Ku pursed her lips tightly. She still shook her head firmly and refused to agree. Ji Tianqing tried to persuade him a few more times, but to no avail. He had to put the matter aside for the time being. "All right, then rest well for a few days. Don't cultivate the Golden Raccoon clan's cultivation technique for now." He said a few words to Ji Ku, then got up and left. A few hours passed quickly, and it was already late at night. Under the pitch-black curtain of night, a tall figure stood in the sea of clouds above the Tianqing mountain range. This person was wearing a white fox fur coat. He had long silver hair and a handsome and resolute face. He was Kun Wu. He used a secret technique to hide his presence and stood quietly in the sea of clouds, looking down at the Tianqing palace that was 1,000 meters away. Ever since he saw the crescent moon mark on Ji Ku's forehead, he had been feeling uneasy and could not calm down. He had a bad premonition in his heart. He felt that Tianqing Palace might not be peaceful, and that there might be some danger. Regardless of whether Ji Ku was his long-lost little sister or not, at least Ji Ku was a member of his clan. He was worried about Ji Ku's safety, so when night fell, he quietly came to the Tianqing mountain range and hid in the sea of clouds, silently looking at Tianqing Palace. As time passed, the curtain of night grew darker, and the cold wind in the sky grew more bitingly cold. At this moment, Kun Wu's hawk-like sharp eyes suddenly saw a flash of cold light under the curtain of night below. He focused his eyes and immediately saw it clearly. It was a vigorous black silhouette, holding a cold and frightening treasured sword in his hand. He was rushing through the forest as fast as lightning towards the heavenly palace. The black figure's presence was cold and powerful. He moved as fast as a flash of light and was silent. He was clearly a heavenly origin expert. Moreover, this person did not rush toward the main entrance of Tianqing Palace, but rushed toward the side of the palace. In a short span of a dozen breaths, he had crossed 1,000 meters and entered the forest on the side of the palace. He wanted to sneak into Tianqing Palace. Seeing this, Kun Wu frowned, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Just as he was about to warn the people in Tianqing Palace, he suddenly realized that another figure had suddenly appeared in the forest on the side of Tianqing Palace. It was also a heavenly origin expert dressed in black and wearing a mask. He was flying in the night sky with a pair of wings formed by his true essence. He waved the sword in his hand and slashed out a 5-colored light blade. Swoosh! The 5-colored sword light formed by his true essence was more than 10 meters long. It cut through the night sky as fast as lightning and slashed into the dark forest. With a muffled bang, the black figure that had sneaked into the forest was forced into the sky by the sword light. The two black figures confronted each other in the night sky above the forest. They did not need to speak and immediately began to fight with their swords. Swoosh! 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 The two silently waved their swords and continued to display their unique sword skills. They began to fight in the night sky. Endless streams of sword light lit up the nearby night sky. The sharp sword chi and the fragments of light that burst out tore apart the dense forest around them, causing dust and wood chips to fly up into the air. However, the two black figures deliberately suppressed their sword skills, as if they did not dare to make too much noise to avoid alerting the people in Tianqing Palace. The two sides fought for a few moves, but no one was able to gain the upper hand. The two saw that their opponent's strength was not ordinary, so they stopped fighting at the same time and quietly retreated. Kun Wu stood in the sea of clouds and stared at the two black figures leaving. A playful smile appeared on his face. Interesting. Ji Tianqing has only been in the monarch mansion for a few days, and he has already been targeted. Looking at the posture of the two men in black, one wants to sneak into Tianqing Palace to assassinate, while the other hides outside Tianqing Palace, secretly protecting and guarding. The two guys are acting secretly and don't want to be discovered by Ji Tianqing. It seems that Ji Tianqing's identity and background are not as simple as they seem. If he is just a commoner from the 9 regions of the southern land, how could he cause such a disturbance? Kun Wu thought to himself and became more and more curious about Ji Tianqing's identity and background. In Tianqing Palace, in the second tallest and loftiest palace. In a room on the top floor of the palace, it was quiet and dark. Ji Tianqing was standing by the window, looking indifferently at the night sky not far away. There was a trace of cold killing intent in his eyes. Yan stood beside him and also stared at the night sky outside the window. Just now, the scene of the two men in black fighting in the night sky had already fallen into their eyes. Yan frowned and shouted angrily in a low voice, "I thought that the monarch mansion was the holy land of martial arts. I didn't expect that this place is also not a good place. We just entered the monarch mansion for a few days, and someone can't wait to make a move on us." Ji Tianqing said calmly, "That man in black of unknown origin has been secretly spying on Tianqing Palace for several nights. I expect that after he finds out the situation of Tianqing Palace, he will definitely be unable to hold back his killing intent and find a chance to sneak into the palace to assassinate us. I have already set up the Tianyuan array in the courtyard, waiting for that man in black to walk into the trap and see who he is." Chapter 541. Ever since Yunyao warned Ji Tianqing, he had been on guard for the past few days. Not only was he on guard against the people from the Duanmu and Murong families, but he was also on guard against the other princes who approached him rashly. In fact, even when he was cultivating or sleeping in the Sky Air Palace, he was constantly on guard. Although there weren't any guards or experts guarding the huge heavenly palace, there were still many of them. But in the past few days, he had set up powerful Tianyuan formations everywhere in the palace. With his attainments in formations, the Tianyuan formations he set up were very powerful. They were enough to fight and kill low-level Tianyuan powerhouses. The ubiquitous Tianyuan formations were much more effective than the guards. Of course, Yan knew about Ji Tianqing's plan and the deployment he had made over the past few days. He frowned and thought for a moment. Then, he whispered to Ji Tianqing, "Senior brother Tianqing, you've been planning for a few days and made sufficient preparations. It's a pity that the black-clothed assassin didn't manage to sneak in and was stopped by another black-clothed man. However, the second black-clothed man who appeared was lurking outside Tianqing Palace. He seemed to be protecting us and helping us block the assassin. I wonder who that person is. Or, who sent him here?" Ji Tianqing also looked puzzled. He nodded slightly and said, "That's right. We have to investigate the identity of the second black-clothed man as soon as possible. We don't have any other friends in the Emperor Palace other than Senior Sister. Who would secretly protect us?" Yan pursed his lips and thought for a moment. Then, he whispered, "Senior brother, the only answer I can think of is Senior Sister. I don't think anyone else would send anyone to protect us other than her, right?" Ji Tianqing pondered for a moment. Then, he shook his head and said, "Not necessarily. If Senior Sister wanted to help us, she could have just told us. Why would she send someone to protect us secretly? Besides, the second black-clothed man was a Tianyuan powerhouse. How could Senior Sister mobilize a Tianyuan powerhouse to protect us? She only has one Sky Origin stage cultivator by her side and he is the leader of the guards arranged by the Cloud Spirit Palace. He only listens to the Cloud Spirit Palace." Yunyao had always been in the Sky Pillar sect, so she didn't have any trusted aides or guards by her side. Even if she wanted to mobilize Sky Origin stage experts from Cloud Spirit Palace to secretly protect Tianqing Palace, the Yun family might not agree. Sky Origin stage cultivators were not cabbages. Even in the ancient clans, they were the mainstays. How could they be ordered around? Yen listened to Ji Tianqing's explanation and immediately understood the key point. However, this made him even more confused. Senior brother Tianqing, if it wasn't eldest senior sister's men, then who could it be? Ji Tianqing frowned and shook his head, saying in a deep voice, I can't think of anyone who would secretly help us. Now that we are in the open, those who want to deal with us and those who want to help us are all in the dark. The water in the imperial residence is getting muddier and muddier. We have to investigate it as soon as possible so that we can seize the opportunity. Yes. Yen nodded with a firm expression, full of confidence in him. Ji Tianqing patted his shoulder and said in a deep voice, that black-clothed assassin was stopped. He won't take the bait again tonight. Yen, go back and rest. After that, the two left the room and returned to their respective residences. Ji Tianqing returned to his room and sat cross-legged on his bed, silently cultivating. Now that he had his own spirit vein and cave, the biggest benefit was that he didn't have to worry about cultivation resources. Tianqing Palace had an endless amount of spirit qi, which allowed him to cultivate with twice the result with half the effort. Even the burial of heaven in Kenshin's tomb could continuously absorb the spirit qi of heaven and earth to speed up the recovery of his strength. Tianqing Palace was located above the spring of the spirit vein, so the spirit qi was extremely abundant. There was also a super large array set up in the cave, which gathered the spirit qi from all directions, causing the spirit qi in the palace to form 5-colored spirit clouds. As soon as Ji Tianqing started to practice cultivation, the 5-colored clouds above the palace turned into wisps of 5-colored spirit mist that poured into his body in an endless stream. The incomparably pure spirit qi of heaven and earth turned into surging vital essence and surged violently in the sword palace in his body. He cultivated the 8th level of the path of the sword heart. While constantly tempering the sword palace, he also allowed the sword embryo to gradually grow and strengthen, accumulating more and more vital essence. The 8th level of the path of the sword heart is to temper the body to the extreme and reach the limit of strength. Only when the body reaches the limit and is fully prepared can I cultivate the 9th level of the path of the sword heart and merge with the sword heart. In addition, I have to master the wood and earth elemental energy as soon as possible so that I can gather the power of the 5 elements and increase my strength faster. Ji Tianqing silently calculated in his heart. He had already made preparations and arrangements for his future cultivation plan and steps. After a while, he entered a state of emptiness and concentrated on cultivating, forgetting the passage of time. 2 days passed quickly. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ji Tianqing was still meditating in the room, surrounded by 5-colored spirit qi. At this moment, Yen came to the door and called softly, Senior Tianqing, are you in the room? Senior martial brother, here's an invitation for you. Ji Tianqing was awakened by Yen's voice. He ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. He was still sitting on the green jade bed. He waved his hand and released a ray of spirit qi to open the door. Yen, what's the matter? Come in. Yen hurriedly walked into the room, holding a sandalwood box inlaid with gold and jade in both hands and handed it to him. Senior Tianqing, just now a black-armored guard from the imperial residence came to the gate of the Tianqing Palace and handed this box to me. The guard said that there was an invitation inside and asked me to hand it to you. An invitation from the imperial residence's guard? Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion. He reached out and took the sandalwood box, holding it in the palm of his hand and looking at it. Who sent the invitation? Why would they put it in such a luxurious box? As he said, he waved his hand and released a ray of spirit qi to unlock the simple array on the sandalwood box. Then, he opened the sandalwood box and took out a red-stamped invitation. He flipped open the luxurious and exquisite invitation card and carefully read its contents. After 10 breaths of time, he finished reading the contents of the invitation. Suddenly, his face changed slightly and he frowned. Yan had been looking at him with a puzzled face. Seeing his strange expression, she couldn't help but ask, "Senior Tianqing, what's wrong? Who sent this invitation card?" Ji Tianqing closed the invitation, put it back into the sandalwood box, and put it into the space ring. He replied with a normal expression, "Long Yunxiao." Long Yunxiao? Yan became more and more confused and asked, "Hasn't the emperor been healing and didn't return to the imperial residence? Why did he send you an invitation?" Ji Tianqing got up and walked to the door. He said calmly, "In 3 days, he will choose a heavenly consort at the Enlightening Heaven Pagoda in the imperial court. He invited me to attend the ceremony." Yan-er's expression suddenly changed. She muttered in a serious tone, "What should come will come. The emperor is finally going to choose a consort." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.